Chapter 640. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu walked out from a secret cave abode located in the depths of Meng Mountains. This cave abode was one of the secret abodes Wu Qi had prepared for himself many years ago, and it was a hiding place for Wu Qi in case he needed to flee for his life. The cave abode was protected by a formation laid out by Wu Qi to conceal his aura. Although his cultivation base was not strong at that time, and the power of the formation was not strong, it was more than enough to conceal one's aura. Meng Mountains was so vast that ordinary heaven immortals could never search every inch of it with their divine will. Therefore, a mere cave abode of several hundred feet in circumference could still be perfectly hidden, and was not damaged in any way. Right after they walked out from the cave abode, the faces of Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu fell instantly. Audiobook had long squeezed out from Wu Qi's chest, and was standing on Wu Qi's shoulder in a daze. Even little Care, who had been standing on Princess Zhongli's shoulder and digesting the immortal stone given to her by Wu Qi a few days ago, raised her head in astonishment and kept chirping uneasily. Wu Qi had once read an ancient poem. It described the scene of no birds flying over 1,000 mountains, no traces of men left on 10,000 paths. It described the scene of no birds and no men left after a heavy snowfall. Although no birds could be seen in such a desolate mountain after a heavy snowfall, at least a few bird chirps could be heard, and there were at least some fishes leaping in the river next to the fishermen on the boat. But at this moment, Meng Mountains was in a dead silence. No one could be seen on the empty mountain, and no fish could be seen in the green water. Not even the sound of insects could be heard from the bushes under the trees. All kinds of plants such as flowers, grass, and trees could be seen, but not a single animal could be found. Wu Qi, Princess Zhonglu, Audiobook, and little Care spread out their divine will at the same time. In just a flash, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu had covered the entire Meng Mountains with their divine will, but what they saw made their faces turn pale. There were no humans, no beasts, no birds, no fishes. Meng Mountains was the paradise of all demons. But at this moment, not a single demon could be found in all the valleys and valleys of Meng Mountains. The cave abodes of the few demon kings in Meng Mountains had been burned down into a shabby cave, and a few mountains were pressed down into the ground by some mighty magic. A few years ago, when Yen Dan left Myriad Immortals' planet with his subordinates, the 5 demon kings of Great Yen had also left with most of their trusted subordinates. But they were reluctant to abandon their cave abodes which they had managed for thousands of years, so they left many demons to guard them in the mountains. But now, it seemed that their cave abodes were destroyed, and the demons and fiends under their command were naturally unfortunate. From its source all the way to its estuary, Wu Qi carefully scanned every inch of Longyuan River with his divine will. However, the water was completely clean. Apart from countless aquatic plants rolling and writhing in the water, not even a single shrimp could be found. The once bustling and powerful aquatic clan of Longyuan River was completely gone. Even the spirit tapeworm river, which had given Wu Qi a very deep impression, the countless spirit-sucking tapeworms that gave him goosebumps when he thought about them, had vanished completely. Meng Mountains, a vast mountain that stretched for tens of millions of miles, was now completely devoid of any living creature. Wrong, it was not that there were no living creatures. Those flowers, grass, and trees were still alive, but all the animals were gone. Wu Qi had dug 300 miles deep into the ground with his divine will, but even in the deepest underground cave, there were no living creatures. The fishes and shrimps that lived in the dark rivers in the depths of the earth had also vanished without a trace, and the earthworms and worms that lived in the mud layer were gone as well. What is going on? Wu Qi turned to look at Princess Zhonglu in astonishment. Princess Zhongli's face was extremely unsightly as well. Suddenly, she closed her eyes and walked to a 10,000-years-old tree with a trunk so wide that it would take at least 100 men to wrap their arms around it. She pressed both hands on the trunk of the tree, and from her palms, a faint greenish divine ray was injected into the trunk. The huge ancient tree began to sway even though there was no wind. Its branches were waving happily, and its leaves were rustling noisily, as if there were countless tiny mouths talking at the same time. Wu Qi looked at all this with a blank expression. It was an art of psychic communication taught to him by Princess Zhonglu, but he just could not learn it no matter how hard he tried. He could barely communicate with those Yin spirits and wild ghosts, but when it came to communicating with these flowers and trees, Wu Qi just could not figure out the principle behind it. On the contrary, Princess Zhonglu did not need any practice at all. When her bloodline was awakened, she naturally possessed this divine ability. Fire, monstrous flame. Huge flying swords streaked across the sky. Slaughter, slaughter, oh slaughter. The Longyuan River turned red. Those powerful demons and devils were killed, their blood collected in jade bottles, and their souls taken away. Those weak living beings were captured, carried away by the wild wind and thrown out of the forest. An aura that made Wu Qi uneasy was spreading out from every corner of Meng Mountains. Not only the 10,000 years old tree, all the flowers, trees, and other plants in the vicinity of Meng Mountains were awakened at the same time. Although they could not move or speak, they were born with a little bit of intelligence. They sensed some extremely tragic things that happened in Meng Mountains, and they immediately sent out the aura they sensed to Princess Zhonglu through the mysterious connection between plants. The grayish aura came rushing over from all directions, injecting into the body of the 10,000 years old tree. The 10,000 years old tree let out a shrill wail. Its branches and twigs gradually withered and withered, its leaves quickly turned yellow, and even the weeds around it were affected by the aura and fell to the ground. Even without Princess Zhonglu telling him, Wu Qi could clearly sense the enormous aura contained in the aura. This aura was simply too strong, and a little too tragic. All the plants were wailing and wailing, and a monstrous resentment was gathering over. Even this giant tree, whose trunk was so thick that it would take 100 men to wrap their arms around it, could not withstand the resentment, and its life force was rapidly fading away. In the Tao of heaven and earth, nature was of utmost importance. For seasons came and went, flowers bloomed and withered, herbivores ate the grass, carnivores hunted the prey, and their excrement and rotting bodies became the fertilizer for the flowers and trees. This was how simple the self-circulation of nature was. A tiny bit of innate divine light transformed into all the living beings in the heaven and earth, including animals and plants, who said that plants were heartless. These plants contained a tiny bit of innate spirituality, and in fact, they had a very deep affection for the heaven and earth, for all the living beings in the world, for the animals that had been around them for years, and for those demons that had become sentient beings. Those animals played around them, lived around them, and gave birth under their protection. There were countless giant trees that had grown up in the depths of Meng Mountains, some hundreds of years, some thousands of years, and some tens of thousands of years old, and all these were recorded in their growth rings. When these animals suddenly disappeared without a trace, when their aura vanished completely, when their souls vanished from the heaven and earth, these plants also sensed it, and a monstrous resentment was born in their bodies. If it were not for the fact that Myriad Immortals' planet was surrounded by a perilous environment that prevented the aura of these plants from spreading out, just the resentment of the countless flowers and trees in Meng Mountains would have immediately triggered some unpredictable changes. The so-called flying frost in 6 moons was just a supernatural phenomenon that was sensed by the heaven and earth. The intense resentment accumulated in Meng Mountains was more than enough to make some existences on Myriad Immortals' planet suffer the wrath of the heaven. Wu Qi took a deep breath, sensing the terrible resentment in the gray aura. Nodding slowly, he reached out a hand and pressed it on the rapidly withering giant tree in front of him. "Don't die, stay alive," he said in a deep voice. "If your old friend is really gone, I'll take you to a place full of life. You are not allowed to die. Stay alive." An enormous amount of energy essence poured out of Wu Qi's body and kept flowing into the giant tree's body. A dazzling green light burst out of the giant tree's body, and its withered body began to fill up rapidly, while its yellow leaves quickly turned green. A ball of black light burst out of Wu Qi's palm, sucking in all the resentment coming from the countless flowers and trees in Meng Mountains like a black hole. Chaotic energy could absorb and digest anything. If this monstrous resentment were to fall on other immortals, it would be a vicious thing that would destroy their immortal souls. But, after being sucked into Wu Qi's body, his chaotic energy quickly digested the resentment, and in the blink of an eye, it was devoured by Wu Qi. It's Patriarch Yuan Hua. He sensed some information from the digested resentment, and recognized Patriarch Yuan Hua's appearance, as well as the immortal sword in his hand that emitted a scorching flame. Gradually, some of the events that happened that day began to play out in his mind. Patriarch Yuan Hua was so angry that he personally went to Myriad Immortals' planet to hunt down Wu Qi's relatives and clan members. In the end, Wu Qi had no relatives in Great Yen. Furious and ashamed, Patriarch Yuan Hua began to eradicate everything related to Wu Qi. Star-Picking City was razed to the ground, and Great Yen was completely destroyed. However, when Patriarch Yuan Hua found his way to Meng Mountains and was about to lay his hands on Meng Village and Little Meng City, Wanying Dragon King had already sneakily brought away all the people of Meng Village and Little Meng City. His heart was burning with anger, but he could not vent it out completely. As a result, Patriarch Yuan Hua became even more bedeviled. However, he had massacred Star-Picking City and hundreds of major cities of Great Yen, killing hundreds of millions of innocent people. Because of that, Patriarch Yuan Hua had finally drawn the attention of some fiends from the outer heavenly realms, and was possessed by some unknown existence. It was in the depths of Meng Mountains that Patriarch Yuan Hua was completely bedeviled. Many nearby flowers and trees had witnessed the process of him being possessed by the fiend. What followed was a brutal massacre and looting. Patriarch Yuan Hua kept murmuring the terms Blood Sea Technique and Pool of 10,000 Spirits Blood Pool, and muttered something about breaking through the realm of Gold Immortal and becoming the disciple of some unknown existence. He kept murmuring these things over and over again, stirring up a monstrous wave of blood in Meng Mountains. With his face turning pale, Wu Qi quickly condensed his divine sense into a thread and swept it in the direction of Ji City. Meng Mountains had been slaughtered, but what about Great Yen? Princess Zhang Li's face fell as well. Suddenly, a strong green wind rushed out of her body, bringing along a thread of Princess Zhang Li's divine sense and rushing toward Ji City. Princess Zhang Li's affinity with nature was stronger than Wu Qi's, so her divine sense had arrived at Ji City before Wu Qi. What greeted her eyes was a scene that was even more horrible than hell. It made Princess Zhang Li's face turn pale, and she suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. The people of Great Yen. Suddenly, Princess Zhang Li's body turned hazy and translucent. She transformed into a thundercloud and flew toward Ji City. With a sway of his body, a monstrous dark fiend energy suddenly towered into the sky around Wu Qi. Patriarch Yuan Hua, you old beast, you deserve to die. With a flicker of his body, Wu Qi exercised the Quafu chasing the sun step, and with just one step, he had arrived outside Ji City. Chapter 641. Corpses piled up like mountains, and blood flowed like oceans. Rotting corpses were piled up on the ground, filled with air. Pale bones, colorful internal organs, silver tendons, and hair that were coiled up in a mess. Even in hell, there would not be such a scene. Countless blood bubbles of various sizes kept popping up in the huge blood pool, as if there was a stove underneath heating it up. A strong smell of blood lingered in the air, so strong that even the wind could not blow it away. The smell condensed into a pale red baleful aura in the air, in which countless twisted figures could be vaguely seen twisting and struggling, and pale faces could be seen flashing across from time to time. The souls of the dead were screaming and roaring wildly, but there was no sound at all. Tens of thousands of longbow people stood stiffly where they were, unable to move. Laughing and laughing, Patriarch Yuan Hua pushed Bai Wu onto the blood cloud and began to tear her clothes at a leisurely pace. Bai Wu's face was pale, and her eyes were bloodshot. She opened her mouth and tried to bite her tongue to commit suicide, but Patriarch Yuan Hua reached out a hand and grabbed her jaw. What an ignorant little girl! Patriarch Yuan Hua laughed in a strange voice. You have the body of an immortal. How can you compare it to a mortal? A mortal will die if he cuts his tongue, but you will only look ugly when you do. How can you look ugly before I enjoy you? He ran his finger across Bai Wu's cheek, and a beam of blood-red light seeped into it. Bai Wu's facial muscles lost all strength, and she could only lie stiffly on the blood cloud and let Patriarch Yuan Hua do whatever he wanted. Patriarch Jiang Yun roared hoarsely. He opened his mouth so hard that the corner of his mouth was torn open, and a great deal of blood kept gushing out of the wound. Patriarch Yuan Hua was about to violate Bai Wu when he suddenly turned his head and saw the blood oozing out of Patriarch Jiang Yun's face. He laughed evilly and said, How could I forget this? Beautiful women, beautiful scenery, and wonderful things need hot blood to liven up the atmosphere. With a point of his finger, 100 tall and sturdy Longbow Kingdom men walked slowly to the edge of the blood-red cloud, standing in a circle and surrounding the cloud that was about an acre in circumference. The burly men bent down stiffly and pointed their heads at Patriarch Yuan Hua. Accompanied by a sharp sword cry, the black flying sword that was circling in the sky whistled down, and like a sharp knife cutting through tofu, it chopped off 100 large heads. Patriarch Yuan Hua, Patriarch Jiang Yun, Bai Wu, Qing Xia, and even the old Taoists, including Qing Xin, Qing Xin, and Qing Yi, were all covered in hot blood. In particular, most of Bai Wu's clothes had been torn off, and her fair skin was covered in a thick layer of blood. She was covered in blood from head to toe, giving off a bloody, ferocious, and strange beauty. Patriarch Yuan Hua was excited. Laughing wildly, he quickly untied his belt and took off his Taoist robe. The old Longbow oracle, who was waving his hands and crying at the top of his lungs, suddenly raised his hands, threw his head back, and hissed, "The ghosts and deities of heaven and earth, the souls of our ancestors, and all the living things in the world can testify. Today, my clan swears a bloodline oath. If anyone can kill and expel this demon, save my clan from death, and preserve the descendants of my clan will be slaves and servants for generations to come. We will be loyal and do anything for that person." Patriarch Yuan Hua's fierce and cruel means had plunged all the Longbow people present into complete despair. At the critical moment of the extinction of his clan, the old shaman couldn't care less. He swore the most sacred bloodline oath, using the future of his clan's descendants to swear that as long as someone could save his clan and not let the bloodline of his clan go extinct, he was willing to pay the heaviest price. Even if they were slaves, in the face of the bloodline inheritance, nothing counted for anything. Tens of thousands of Longbow men howled and wailed at the top of their voices. Although they could not move their bodies, and they could not control the muscles on their faces, it did not stop them from howling out from their chests, from their hearts, like the howling of the north wind. The long howl spread in all directions with an eerie chill, and wherever it passed, the blood energies and baleful qi were torn to pieces by it. Just as the old oracle was swearing the bloodline oath and tens of thousands of Longbow people were howling at the same time, Wu Qi exercised the Quafu chasing the sun step and arrived at the edge of the blood pool. Glaring angrily at the vast blood pool in front of him, and then at the piles of corpses that stretched for millions of miles, Wu Qi's hairband broke inch by inch, and his long hair stood straight up even though there was no wind. A powerful force poured into his hair, making it flutter and produce a crisp ringing sound like the clashing of blades and spears. "Damn you, old fogey!" Wu Qi gave a low growl as he spun his body sideways and slammed his body toward Patriarch Yuan Hua. He had used all his strength in this attack, and his body streaked across the void like a mad flood dragon as he thrust his shoulder toward Patriarch Yuan Hua's back. Faint purple mist rose from all over his body, and dragon scales kept emerging under his skin. Wu Qi had exercised both the true body of heaven and earth scripture and the heavenly dragon transformation technique to the extreme. Patriarch Yuan Hua did not expect someone to ambush him on Myriad Immortals' planet. He had killed all the local demons and fiends on Myriad Immortals' planet, and even if there were a few survivors, they were no match for him. Therefore, they had long been hiding in secret places, not daring to come out. He had killed all the living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet, even those tiny shrimps. So, how could someone ambush him? All his attention was attracted by Bai Wu's beautiful body. Just as Patriarch Yuan Hua was about to taste the delicious meat, Wu Qi struck out like a clap of thunder, thrusting his shoulder into Patriarch Yuan Hua's back. A crisp crack rang out, and Patriarch Yuan Hua's body exploded. There was no flesh or bone in his body, and as soon as he exploded, he turned into a cloud of blood mist that swirled and screamed as it shot into the sky in a beam of blood-red light. Vicious curses poured out of the fleeing blood-red beam of light. Patriarch Yuan Hua cursed the heavens and the earth, cursing everyone he could find. He cursed all kinds of vicious words that were difficult to describe at the moment. As long as he could remember the names of people, whether they were his children, grandchildren, or his disciples, he would curse them without hesitation. No one was spared. A great sheet of blood-red light and ghostly flames came whistling through the dark clouds, while a stream of blood as thick as a bucket rose into the sky from the pool of blood below. The beam of blood-red light fused with the blood-red light, and ghostly flames, and before long, it had turned into a blood-red cocoon about 10 feet in diameter. Wu Qi gave a cold snort as he raised a hand and unleashed a grayish-white beam of cold air. The cold air condensed into a blade in midair, then transformed into a xianbing blade, about 10 feet long, as thin as a cicada's wing, and no more than 3 inches wide. It sped through the air with a beam of white light and hacked onto the blood-red cocoon. It was an offensive divine ability found in the Dark Een water scripture, the Dark Een divine blade. It was a blade formed from the pure Een energy of the world and one's own pure immortal energy. It was extremely cold, and was the best at restraining some evil and poisonous magic. It had a powerful lethality that could scare ghosts and deities away. As the blade passed through the cocoon cracked in half. Patriarch Yuan Hua, who had just regained his human form, gave a muffled snort as the blade pierced through his chest. A large piece of white ice immediately froze his bloody chest, and a cold air poured out of it, freezing the surrounding blood and evil energies into snowflakes. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others who were tied up, as well as Patriarch Yuan Hua, all stared at Wu Qi as if they were looking at a ghost. "Wu Qi, you little punk!" Patriarch Yuan Hua roared at the top of his voice. Patriarch Jiang Yun and Bai Wu were able to speak now that their restrictive spells had been lifted. Both of them cried out Wu Qi's name at the same time. They could never imagine how Wu Qi, who had a weak cultivation base when he left, could possess such a strong overall strength in just a few years, shattering Patriarch Yuan Hua's Dharma body with just one strike. Had it not been for the strange and unpredictable fiend technique Patriarch Yuan Hua cultivated, which made his Dharma body very different from an ordinary immortal body, the strike alone would have killed him. Fiend energy rolled and rolled around Wu Qi, rising into the sky in a black mist. When the surrounding blood and evil energies were touched by the fiend energy gushing out of Wu Qi's body, they plunged into the fiend energy and were digested, turning into a part of it. His vast divine sense spread in all directions, enveloping the entire mountain of corpses and sea of blood. Inch by inch, Wu Qi examined some things in the depths of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood, including the runes and talismans that were hidden very well. There was something strange about the blood pool in front of him. Patriarch Yuan Hua had sent a wisp of his divine sense into it, and he seemed to be deploying some evil and bizarre restrictive spells. Without hesitation, Wu Qi's divine sense plunged into the blood pool and began to compete with the wisp of Patriarch Yuan Hua's divine sense for control. No matter what Patriarch Yuan Hua was going to do, Wu Qi just had to destroy him completely. He could not let him succeed. Wu Qi did not want to waste so much blood essence, which was the blood of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet. If he used it as a sacrifice, it would bring him great benefits. With his hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi stared at Patriarch Yuan Hua silently. All he could think of was to use his divine sense to fight with Patriarch Yuan Hua's divine sense in the blood pool. Patriarch Yuan Hua had already laid out all sorts of restrictive spells in the blood pool, so when his divine sense rushed into it, it immediately caused the blood pool to churn and churn up into monstrous waves. Patriarch Yuan Hua hovered motionlessly in midair. He clearly sensed a terrifying divine sense that was thousands of times stronger than his divine sense was seizing control of the blood pool inch by inch. Patriarch Yuan Hua's expression flickered. Gnashing his teeth, he sent all his divine sense into the blood pool as well. He could no longer care about killing the remaining tens of thousands of longbow people. He needed to activate the blood pool immediately. Looking at Wu Qi hovering in midair, the old oracle suddenly dropped to his knees and cried out, "Immortal, we have sworn a bloodline oath. If you can save us and save our clan from being wiped out, we will serve you loyally for generations to come." Bloodline oath? The Longbow people's bloodline oath? Wu Qi, who was worried about the lack of potential in East Sea County due to its sparse population, was overjoyed. He quickly turned his head and moved Akka to the old oracle as he said happily, "That's great. Since you are loyal to me, I'll definitely make your clan grow stronger. Ha, a mere puppet curse is nothing to me." Then he pointed his finger out. A great sheet of chaotic spirit light shot out of his fingertip, transforming into countless primordial divine runes and smashing into the bodies of the Longbow people. Then, a series of explosions rang out, and black smoke rose from the bodies of the Longbow people as they suddenly regained their ability to move. Wu Qi laughed and said, "I've saved you today. Let's see who can kill you now." Then, he opened his mouth and shot out a beam of chaotic spirit light. Tens of thousands of Longbow people felt their bodies lightened as they were dragged into Wu Qi's interstitial world at the same time. Patriarch Yuan Hua roared furiously. The blood essence and soul of one Longbow man was equal to the total amount of blood essence in tens of thousands of ordinary people. By saving tens of thousands of Longbow people, Wu Qi had taken away the blood essence and soul of hundreds of millions of ordinary people. Patriarch Yuan Hua could not care less. His body transformed into a beam of blood-red light and plunged into the blood pool. Immediately after that, a colossal fiend statue made of blood rose from the pool. The fiend statue stood about 100 miles tall, shrouded in a towering stench of blood. As soon as it appeared, it threw a punch at Wu Qi. Chapter 642. It was hard to tell what the fiend statue looked like, but it was covered in a layer of blood that was hundreds of feet thick, making it hard to see its true form. As soon as he threw out a punch, all the blood energies within 1,000 miles immediately rushed toward his fist as if it had gone mad, transforming into something that looked like a steel plate, covered with sharp triangular spikes, and smashed down toward Wu Qi with a gust of wind. Wu Qi laughed and was about to fight the fiend statue head-on. His true body of heaven and earth mantra and heavenly dragon transformation technique had already reached the peak of the heaven immortal realm. It was a common thing for him to shatter a star with one punch. He was in the mood to weigh the pros and cons of this fiend statue. But before he could throw out his punch, a beam of 5-colored light flashed across from the side. Princess Zhongli had arrived. Princess Zhongli's pretty face turned cold as she saw the giant fiend throwing its fist toward Wu Qi. The 5-colored flame in her eyes shot out thousands of feet away like a volcanic eruption, causing the wind and clouds within 10,000 miles to change color. Large dark clouds quickly gathered in the sky and came crashing down from the sky. Countless thunderbolts as thick as water buckets smashed down, smashing the clouds above the pool of blood and smashing them to pieces. A sheet of purple light shot out of Princess Zhongli's fingertip as she softly chanted a ballad with a simple rhythm. Vaguely, countless spirit lights swirled around her, and suddenly, countless thunderbolts the size of human heads condensed in the purple light, smashing onto the giant fiend statue like a rainstorm. Earth-shaking explosions could be heard one after another. Every single thunderbolt was incredibly powerful, and the shockwaves generated by each thunderbolt could reach hundreds of miles away. Countless thunderbolts blasted on the golem's body, blowing blood out of its body. Large amounts of blood were evaporated by the thunderbolts, turning into blood-red mist and rising into the sky. Countless imprisoned souls in the blood let out miserable howls as they were shattered by the thunderbolts, turning into countless fireflies that drifted away in all directions. Patriarch Yuan Hua's shrill howl rang out from the depths of the blood pool. "Wu Qi, you little punk. You've killed my beloved disciple. I'll definitely kill you today." Wu Qi sneered again and again. He clenched his fists, and the wind between heaven and earth roared and quickly gathered on his fists. His fists were shrouded in a hazy green light, and not long after, they became dazzling, like 2 small suns that no one dared to look directly at. In a radius of 10,000 miles, whirlwinds of sheep horns suddenly rose up. The sharp whistling of the wind was so loud that it hurt people's ears. With a loud shout, Wu Qi pressed his hands downwards. 2 balls of green light whizzed out one after the other, and crashed into the blood pool with a strong gust of wind. A cyan storm erupted, and this part of the world suddenly became a world of wind. Wu Qi silently recited the various essentials of the Song of Gale. His limbs and bones seemed to have become hollow like bamboo, while the strong storm shuttled back and forth in his body, gradually drawing the surrounding wind into countless 100-mile-long wind blades that slashed and slashed wildly in the blood pool. The blood pool, measuring 10,000 miles in circumference, was torn to pieces by the wind blades, and more than half of the restrictive spells that Patriarch Yuan Hua had placed under the pool were destroyed by Wu Qi's violent attack. Using his divine will, Wu Qi quickly controlled the blood energy in the surroundings and condensed them into primordial runes. Numerous runes emerged one after another, and a faint blood-red light rushed out from the depths of the blood pool. Patriarch Yuan Hua was hiding in the depths of the blood pool, and his control over the blood pool was starting to weaken. Whether it was in terms of cultivation base or attainment of the Tao, Wu Qi was now far stronger than Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Yuan Hua, who had become a fiend, acted more on instinct, and his every move was irrational. Therefore, it was a piece of cake for Wu Qi to deal with the current Patriarch Yuan Hua with brute force. Not only that, Princess Zhonglu was constantly striking down countless thunderbolts, each of which was the divine thunder of subduing fiends of the primordial Tao of divinity, which was specially used to deal with all kinds of evil fiends. The thunder magic of the primordial Tao of divinity was condensed directly from the power of nature. Although it was less subtle and ingenious in structure than the thunder magic of immortals, it was more direct, more domineering, and more in line with the profound principles of heaven and earth. Therefore, its lethality was more direct and terrible. The huge fiend statue had been smashed to pieces by Princess Zhonglu, and now the thunderbolts were drilling into the blood sea. Princess Zhongli's divine sense, which was more dexterous and delicate than Wu Qi's, had turned into a huge net and covered the blood sea, using it to track Patriarch Yuan Hua's movements. The divine thunder of subduing fiends, which had an amazing lethality against evil fiends, was shuttling back and forth in the blood sea with Princess Zhongli's divine sense. Countless purple thunderbolts were weaving back and forth, dyeing the vast blood sea with a faint layer of purple. Suddenly, Princess Zhongli's divine sense discovered a blood shadow flashing past at high speed in the depths of the blood sea. Thousands of divine thunder of subduing fiends rushed over at high speed, clinging to the shadow and exploding at the same time. A hoarse howl of agony rang out from the bottom of the blood sea as Patriarch Yuan Hua's true form was torn to pieces. Countless drops of blood shot out in all directions, most of which were turned into nothingness by the exploding thunderbolts. Each drop of blood was the manifestation of Patriarch Yuan Hua's natal energy essence. Now that most of the blood sea was turned into smoke, Patriarch Yuan Hua's vitality was severely damaged. After letting out a few shrill howls, Patriarch Yuan Hua's true form hid on a dark altar made of bones in the deepest part of the blood sea. While absorbing the blood nearby to heal his body, he gritted his teeth and looked at the chaotic blood sea around him. The wind blades controlled by Wu Qi were hacking and slashing in the blood sea like lightning bolts. These wind blades were a great threat to Patriarch Yuan Hua. He saw with his own eyes that a few corpses floating in the blood sea were hit by one of the wind blades, and then tens of thousands of green wind blades of various sizes immediately rushed up and shredded the corpses into the tiniest particles. Then hundreds of purple thunderbolts swarmed over, and the thunderbolts quickly exploded and turned the tiny particles into nothingness. The vast pool of blood had completely turned into a world controlled by Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu. Patriarch Yuan Hua could only hide on the core altar, struggling at death's door with the protection of the broken blood-red flag behind him. This tens of feet long and wide blood-red flag was slowly fluttering in the blood-red water. Whenever a wind blade or lightning bolt approached, the flag would shake slightly, and the surrounding blood-red water would tumble, sending the wind blade or lightning bolt hundreds of feet away in another direction. The change of space was extremely magical. Even with the current divine abilities of Wu Qi and Princess Zhang, they did not discover Patriarch Yuan Hua, who was protected by the flag. It showed how powerful the original form of the flag was. But now, it was riddled with hundreds of holes of various sizes, and the flagpole was badly damaged by some divine weapon. It looked as if it had been bitten by a few mad dogs. The power of the flag was far weaker than when it was in perfect condition. "You little bastard! You little bitch!" Patriarch Yuan Hua trembled with rage. "You've come to Myriad Immortals Planet? What about White Cloud Planet? Where is Green Cliff Planet? Damn it! I should have killed that little bitch myself that day. I should have taken her by force. I should have sowed the seeds myself, and I could have reaped great benefits." Brandishing his fists, Patriarch Yuan Hua growled furiously, "A moment of carelessness has cost me the whole game." Patriarch Yuan Hua howled in exasperation, then his voice suddenly became very soft and feminine as he said, "But how could I lose? I, Lord Blood Ocean, am the descendant of Li Xuezi." "Hehe, no, I am Li Xuezi, the ancient celestial fiend. How could I possibly lose?" Pointing at the void with both hands, Patriarch Yuan Hua said in a strange voice, "Just wait and see. The Emperor of the Celestial Court? The 5 Emperors of 5 Directions? Hehe. Shenyuan's sword is a good treasure. I can't believe my blood-draining fiend flag could not withstand its slash. Ah. What a headache. Who does Shenyuan's sword belong to? Who are the 5 Emperors of 5 Directions? The Emperor of the Celestial Court? Isn't he dead?" Taking a deep breath, a thin beam of blood-red light suddenly shot out from between Patriarch Yuan Hua's brows, within which a tiny blood-red figure could be vaguely seen sitting cross-legged. He cried out in a low voice, "I can't care so much anymore. I need to extract the power of souls from the pool of blood to restore my fiend soul, and then I'll deal with the rest later. I must avenge this. I'm not going to suffer any losses." Wu Qi and Princess Zhang were using their divine abilities to search for Patriarch Yuan Hua in the pool of blood. But as Patriarch Yuan Hua was protected by the blood-draining fiend flag, they could not find his true form no matter how hard they tried. For a moment, Wu Qi was a little anxious. Suddenly, he gave a loud cry as his body grew to about 100,000 feet tall. Then, with a twist of his body, in front of the stunned Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others, he transformed into a 100,000 feet long, gold and silver dragon python of fire and ice. A ferocious and savage aura spread out of Wu Qi's body. Judging by Wu Qi's current appearance and sensing the aura in his body, it was clear that Wu Qi was a real beast at the moment. He was no longer an immortal with a strong cultivation base. Patriarch Jiang Yun roared, "Wu Qi, are you really a dragon python that has cultivated into a human form?" Wu Qi did not answer. Suddenly, a huge tumor bulged out of his neck. He was gathering all the power in his body, transforming it into the unique Xianbing divine energy of dragon pythons, and was about to spray it out to freeze the whole pool of blood. He did not believe that Patriarch Yuan Hua could survive in the blood pool if it was frozen. But Princess Zhang flew into a rage. She pointed a finger at Patriarch Jiang Yun and snapped, "You are the dragon python that has cultivated into a human form. Your whole family, from the old to the young, are all dragon pythons that have cultivated into a human form." Standing on Princess Zhang Li's shoulder, little Kair was also twittering and cursing at Patriarch Jiang Yun, and then she spat at him with great force. Tao Buzan stood on Wu Qi's head with all 4 claws, staring at little Kair with a distressed look. "You are not a lady, but you do have the bloodline of the phoenix, don't you?" Lao Tzu only cares about his own happiness. Why should he care so much about a lady or not? How am I going to deal with this little chick? I don't know where to start if I keep a tight watch on her." Hovering in midair, Wu Qi prepared for a full quarter of an hour. Then, a white beam of light about 1 mile in diameter shot whistling through the air and hit the blood pool. The blood pool froze abruptly, and then countless ice cubes of various sizes appeared out of thin air, quickly freezing the blood pool into a blood-colored ice cube. Right at this moment, the souls of the billions of living beings in the blood pool disappeared at the same time. A great suction force came from the core of the blood pool, sucking all the souls into it. A very fine beam of blood-red light shot out from the frozen ice cube, and a monstrous fiend aura slowly spread out. Hee, Patriarch's fiend soul has finally recovered by 30%. 30% of my fiend soul is more than enough for me to roam freely. Let me kill this little beast first, then enjoy your little bitch. After that, I'll extract the endless blood essence in this blood pool to restore my fiend energy. Suddenly, the beam of blood-red light flickered. Wu Qi, Princess Zhang Lu, and little Kair froze at the same time, and then their bodies fell from the sky and fell to the ground. The scene before their eyes suddenly turned into a boundless sea of blood, and their divine souls had been sucked into an unknown space. Chapter 643. The blood-red space had a circumference of about 100 miles. Below it was a surging sea of blood, while above it were patches of blood-red clouds. Just the sight of it was enough to make one's mind tremble and cause one's true spirit to almost collapse. Amidst the sea of blood and clouds of blood, a huge chair made of white bones floated in the air, and a bloody devil figure sat cross-legged on the chair. Beside him were dozens of naked women dancing like devils, and all kinds of strange postures could cause one's blood to boil, and they couldn't help but feel aroused. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu focused their minds and watched the devil figure silently. Little Kair closed her eyes. Her body was protected by a ring of bright, glass-like crimson flame, which prevented the devil's thoughts from invading. Her divine soul was also safe and sound. The flame on little Kair's body was the Phoenix clan's famous true spirit fire, Nanmingli fire. It had many wonderful uses, and protecting one's mind was only a small part of it. This space was clearly created by the devil figure using his enormous divine thought. It was similar to an immortal's interstitial world. In an immortal's interstitial world, everything was real and was no different from the outside world. It could even support countless people. As for this world created by the devil figure, it would be more appropriate to call it the devil's void. This space existed in between existence and nothingness. It was born and destroyed according to the devil figure's thoughts. There were endless mysteries between life and death, making it infinitely mysterious. Wu Qi and the others had accidentally fallen into its trap. They were sucked into the devil's void by the devil figure's tremendous power, which was condensed from the souls of countless living beings. In this void, the devil shadow could transform into anything with a single thought and destroy everything with a single thought. It had a huge advantage over the others. Just like the dancing female devils beside his armchair, they were also the devil figure's manifestation with the help of his divine thought. Every move he made was in line with the great Tao of the devil sect. Every move he made was filled with boundless murderous intent. If one accidentally fell into his trap, one's soul would be destroyed. Little Kair knew that she was young and her cultivation base was shallow. Thus, when she was sucked into the devil's void, she immediately released a wisp of Nanmingli fire from the depths of her divine soul to protect it. She dared not be careless. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu were not afraid of the dancing female devils. Princess Zhang Lu was too shy to look at their unbearable movements, while Wu Qi watched them perform the heavenly fiend dance with delight. If he had a dozen bottles of iced beer in hand and a very exciting dance tune, Wu Qi would love to dance with the female devils. Princess Zhang Lu was proficient in the art of ghosts and gods of the primordial divine Tao. She was best at dealing with all kinds of evil ghosts and gods, so a mere heavenly fiend dance could not shake her mind. Wu Qi's divine power was enough to make all the evil immortals who cultivated in the art of illusion and soul enchantment vomit blood. His chaotic spiritual energy was omnipotent. The soul-stirring fiend aura emitted by the heavenly fiend dance was all spirit medicine to replenish his magic power. He wished there were more of these female devils. After pulling Wu Qi and his companions into the devil's void, the bloody fiend shadow did not make a sound. He was waiting for Wu Qi and his companions to fall into his trap, and then he would come up with other plans. He had just devoured the souls of countless living beings on myriad immortals' planet. Although the enormous soul energy had restored 30% of his true spirit and fiend soul, he still felt a little indigestion. He was working hard to digest the enormous soul source energy in these souls, and erasing some of the tough soul marks in them. As he was busy with this, he had no time to pay attention to Wu Qi and his companions. For a moment, everyone was staring at each other. Suddenly, Ao Buzan, who was coiled around Wu Qi's neck, began to howl. After entering the devil's void, Ao Buzan fixed his furtive eyes on those female devils who were dancing wildly. After staring at each other for a quarter of an hour, all the scales on Ao Buzan's body began to sway, and a stream of saliva trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Then he leaped forward, let out a shrill howl, and pounced on those female devils. "Just follow me, my beauties. Follow Lao Tzu, and you'll have a good life. Every night, Lao Tzu will make you feel so good that you'll wish you were dead. You'll die and die again, and you'll live and die again." Saliva flew out from the corner of Ao Buzan's mouth, and his eyes shone brightly as he roared, "Lao Tzu has swept across the world with his dragon whip and spear. Only you will know the power of Lao Tzu's martial arts after you've tasted it." Those female devils laughed softly. One of them, who had huge breasts and extremely fair skin, spread her arms and greeted Ao Buzan with a smile. "Come on, come on, come on," the female devil let out a beautiful cry. Her eyes were watery, as if water could drip out of them at any moment. While cheering, Ao Buzan leaped onto the female devil's body. He stood up on his hind legs, grabbed the female devil's breasts with his 2 hind claws, and grabbed the female devil's face with his 2 front claws. Then he opened his mouth, which was filled with saliva, and fiercely kissed the female devil's pale red lips. Sitting on the throne, the fiend giggled. He slowly rose to his feet, raised a finger, and said, "1." A bright gleam flickered in Princess Zhongli's eyes as she cursed in a low voice, "This lecherous dragon is such a disgrace." Little Kaer hurriedly nodded and agreed with Princess Zhongli's words. Tilting her head, she looked at Ao Buzan disdainfully and gently flapped her wings. Wu Qi smiled faintly. Ao Buzan's background was mysterious and unfathomable, and there were still many things that he was hiding from Wu Qi. If the other people around Wu Qi were caught in the amorous dance, they might have their souls destroyed, and their divine soul power sucked dry by the female devil. But Ao Buzan was an old lecher, a great general in the amorous field. How could he be subdued by a mere dance? Wu Qi remembered that Ao Buzan seemed to have boasted that among his mistresses, there were a few formidable figures among the heavenly fiends from outer heavenly realms. How could Ao Buzan, who was able to make those heartless and heartless outer sky devils bear children for Ao Buzan? Pop pop. Ao Buzan and the female devil gave each other a deep, wet kiss. His long tongue stuck out for half a foot long and rolled up in the female devil's mouth. After that, Ao Buzan spat loudly on the ground and complained, "This old devil must have never touched a woman in his entire life. Why can't this female devil's tongue move? The tongue of this beautiful girl should be as nimble as a snake, as nimble as a fox, as smooth as sand, and as sweet as honey. That's the best. This stiff and cold tongue is like a braised pig's tongue." The devil, who had just risen to his feet, paused for a moment, then roared furiously, "You're not enchanted by my magic?" Ao Buzan gave a weird laugh. With a flash, his body, which was less than 2 feet long, suddenly transformed into a dark bolt of lightning and darted out. His right front claw expanded to the size of a cattail leaf fan, fiercely piercing into the lower part of the devil's body. Ao Buzan roared happily, "You've underestimated Lao Tzu. Let me show you the flying dragon stealing peach palm that Lao Tzu used to shake the entire 3 realms, and even made the emperor of the celestial court tremble with fear." Suddenly, a black light flashed across Ao Buzan's right front claw, and then a mass of runes that looked like a colony of ants flashed across it, transforming into a plume of black smoke that enveloped the claw. He clenched his 5 claws and pulled them out. Along with a shrill howl, Ao Buzan pulled out a string of bloody things. After that, Ao Buzan immediately transformed into a dark beam of light and returned to Wu Qi's shoulder. The devil roared furiously at Ao Buzan, then growled in confusion, This is the void of fiend will created by my divine will. How could I be injured in this void of fiend will? My body in here is the manifestation of my true spirit and devil soul, and it doesn't have any bodily organs. How could you? With a mysterious smile on his face, Aobuzin leisurely showed off the 3 bloody treasures in his hand. He chuckled and said, "What has Lao Tzu not seen before? Back then, there was an idiot whose wife was stolen by Lao Tzu. He trapped Lao Tzu in the void of fiend will, trying to refine Lao Tzu's true spirit with his natal fiend flame. What a pity, what a pity! Lao Tzu is a talented genius. After being trapped in the void of fiend will for 3 months, he managed to comprehend the flying dragon stealing peach palm." Carelessly throwing away the 3 treasures, Aobuzin wiped the blood off his claws on Wu Qi's shoulder, then said complacently, "You shouldn't have used the void of fiend will to deal with Lao Tzu. Your true spirit and your true spirit are intertwined. Although Lao Tzu took out your true spirit and devil soul, the things he took out were the treasures of your true spirit." Wu Qi was struck dumb, Princess Zhonglu was stunned, and little Kair bowed her head and covered it with her wings. Aobuzin laughed wildly and said, "Why don't you send a thread of your divine sense out to check if your true spirit has been castrated by Lao Tzu?" The bloody fiend howled miserably. Suddenly his body turned stiff. Obviously, he had sent a thread of his divine sense out to check on his own body. Not long after that, the fiend began waving his hands and screaming wildly. Pointing his finger at Aobuzin, he roared furiously, "Despicable! Shameless! Filthy! What is your background? How could you attack Patriarch's true spirit through the void of fiend will? How could you use such a vicious fiend technique?" Aobuzin grinned, not bothering to explain anything to the fiend. Chuckling, Wu Qi instinctively clamped his legs together and gave Aobuzin a fierce glare. After that, he pointed his right hand out and unleashed a large sheet of divine flame of order. Bringing with it a high temperature that could frighten all divine souls, fiend souls, evil ghosts, evil gods, and extraterrestrial fiends, the purple and green divine flame filled the entire void in an instant. Without hesitation, Princess Zhonglu raised both hands up high. The divine flame, which was thicker, hotter, better in quality, and more agile than the divine flame of order shot out from Wu Qi's body, transformed into several hundred fiery dragons and thrust out, cooperating with the divine flame unleashed by Wu Qi, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. The high temperature melted everything in this void. The blood clouds were burned through, the blood sea dried up, the evil girls turned into nothingness, and the throne turned into a wisp of smoke. The fiend let out a shrill howl, then roared in exasperation, "Divine flame of order! How could a junior like you possess such an innate divine flame? Bastard! How could you possess such an innate spirit item?" Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were too lazy to give any explanation to this fiend's soul. The monstrous divine flame of order converged inwardly, tightly wrapping the fiend's soul within. A miserable howl echoed out, as a large piece of the fiend's soul's body was suddenly burned off. The fiend's soul exploded abruptly, shooting out a beam of blood-red light and quickly escaping from the void of fiend will. The enormous soul power in the void had lost control, rolling and rocking chaotically in the void. Wu Qi, Princess Zhonglu, and Aobuzin were struck with wild joy. Hastily, they exercised their divine abilities and absorbed the boundless soul power to their heart's content. In an instant, the 3 of them had shared the boundless soul power. After that, the void shattered, and their souls returned to their fleshly bodies. Chapter 644. On the blood cloud, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others saw a beam of blood-red light shoot up into the sky, and then spread out in all directions. In the next moment, the huge snake Wu Qi had transformed into fell heavily to the ground, while Princess Zhonglu, Aobuzin, and little Kair froze and fell to the ground as well. Before long, Patriarch Yuan Hua could be seen sitting on an altar made of bones, with a tattered flag fluttering behind his back. The strong aura of blood almost made Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others pass out. Patriarch Yuan Hua sat on the altar with a blank expression, his eyes dull and lifeless. Clearly, his divine sense had gone into the fiend void, and he had no reaction to what was happening outside. Bai Wu was horrified. She had just seen Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Li beat Patriarch Yuan Hua to the point that he dared not show his face, and she thought they had finally found their savior. But in the end, Patriarch Yuan Hua's fiend cultivation technique was so fierce that he had subdued Wu Qi and the others with just a flash of blood-red light. At the thought of the tragic end she would face if she fell into Patriarch Yuan Hua's hands, Bai Wu threw her head back and gave a furious roar. Plumes of white smoke sprayed out of her body as dozens of shuttle-shaped thunderbolts, each the size of a water tank, shot whistling out and smashed fiercely on Patriarch Yuan Hua's body. The tattered flag fluttered slightly, and a sheet of blood-red light rushed out of Patriarch Yuan Hua's body. The thunderbolts wheeled around him and flew off into the distance. A dull rumble of thunder could be heard coming from afar, and the thunderbolts seemed to have struck something. The dark clouds in the distance churned, and a faint white gleam flickered in the sky. Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out in alarm. With the flag protecting Patriarch Yuan Hua, Bai Wu could not hurt him at all. Patriarch Jiang Yun called out to Bai Wu and asked her to quickly remove the restrictive spells on the stone pillars. There were more than 20 heaven immortals from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect here. If they joined forces, they still had a chance to kill Patriarch Yuan Hua. After all, Patriarch Yuan Hua was only relying on a tattered flag to protect himself. Even if the flag was an incredible immortal item, it looked like it had lost most of its power. It would be unreasonable for the joint forces of over 20 heaven immortals to fail to destroy a badly damaged immortal item. Lady Bai Wu rushed to Patriarch Jiang Yun's side in a flurry, her hands constantly changing incantation gestures, casting all kinds of restrictive spells she knew and hitting the stone pillars. But Bai Wu had learned all her immortal magic from Patriarch Jiang Yun. As the immortal magic they cultivated was not outstanding, and they only knew 2 or 3 of them, they could not deal with the strange restrictive spells that Patriarch Yuan Hua inherited from the ancient fiend gods. After exhausting all the immortal energy in his body, the stone pillar only flashed a few dazzling flames. Other than that, there was no other effect. Bai Wu sat down on the blood cloud dejectedly, while Patriarch Jiang Yun threw his head back and let out a long sigh, tears of blood rolling down his cheeks. Clenching his teeth, Patriarch Jiang Yun stared at Bai Wu and cried out in a deep voice, "Bai Wu, go now. If you have the opportunity to cultivate the great Tao of gold immortals in the future, come back and avenge us. But if not, just find a peaceful place and live a carefree life." It was as if Bai Wu's soul had flown away. She did not respond to Patriarch Jiang Yun's words at all. No matter how Patriarch Jiang Yun tried to persuade her, she just stared blankly at him, tears of blood rolling down her cheeks. Patriarch Jiang Yun could not help but stare blankly at Bai Wu as his lips trembled. Suddenly, he burst into tears and cried, "Heaven, Jiang Yun, have never done anything against heaven and reason in my life. Why am I being punished today? Heaven, why is heaven like this? Can you please open your eyes?" While Patriarch Jiang Yun was weeping and screaming, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the 3 old Taoists, had a bellyful of grievances. Imprisoned on the stone pillars, they could not even cry if they wanted to. Tears streamed down their cheeks as the 3 old Taoists stared at the cloudy sky. They did not know who to tell their grievances to. Patriarch Jiang Yun had never done any evil deeds, and the same went for the 3 brothers. They had spent all their lives in minor heavenly circle realm, cultivating in a peaceful and steady manner, taking in a few apprentices and founding the Tranquil Vimla sect. But they had never done anything like bullying the weak. Why did they have to suffer this fiend calamity? They were in secluded cultivation on Myriad Immortals' planet, so how did they end up in a situation where they were meat on someone's chopping block? Suddenly, Bai Wu rose to her feet, gritted her teeth, and said to Patriarch Jiang Yun with a smile, "Don't worry, this old thief is not really impervious to fire and water." A sonorous sword cry rang out as a beam of sword light shot out from her forehead. It was a small sword, less than 1 inch and 2 inches long, glinting with a misty white light like a leaf. The sword gleamed nimbly, and its blade leaped like a fish. It was a very intelligent creature. When Patriarch Jiang Yun and Qing Xia saw the small sword, their faces flickered with chichis. The faces of Qing Xian and his brothers turned pale as well. They knew what Bai Wu was going to do. With a strange laugh, Bai Wu looked at Patriarch Jiang Yun and said, "If we are going to die, we will die together. How can I abandon my husband and sister and run away?" With a sway of her body, Bai Wu transformed into a clump of white smoke and wrapped around the small sword. The sword emitted a dazzling white light and gradually began to absorb the smoke. It was a desperate attack when an immortal destroyed his immortal soul and immortal body, fusing all his immortal energy into the prime sword. When Patriarch Jiang Yun was traveling around the world, he had found a fragment of this immortal magic in an ancient cave abode. Not only Bai Wu, but even Qing Xian, Qing Yi, and Qing Shen had also practiced this magic. Therefore, when he saw Bai Wu's action, the corners of Patriarch Jiang Yun's eyes exploded at the same time. Blood was slowly dripping from Qing Xia's mouth, while Qing Xian and his brothers swayed and kept coughing up blood from the corners of their mouths. They were either husband and wife or good friends. They had been friends for several periods, and Fairy Bai Wu was risking her life for him. How could they not be moved? Patriarch Jiang Yun suddenly cried out when he saw that Bai Wu was about to die together with them. Suddenly, a plume of dark mist sprayed out of the void in front of Patriarch Yuanhua, who was sitting cross-legged above the blood pool. A pitch-black dragon claw, about the size of a basin, slowly stretched out of the mist, grabbing Patriarch Yuanhua's lower body and twisting it left and right for 7 to 8 times. Then, it pulled out a clump of flesh and blood from Patriarch Yuanhua's lower body. The dragon's claw even flicked its finger, flicking away the pieces of torn clothes and black hair attached to the piece of flesh far away. Only then did it grab the piece of flesh and flee back. The black mist dissipated, and Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out hastily, "Bai Wu, don't do anything stupid. Something has changed." Bai Wu's figure gradually came out of the eye of cloud. She, too, had her mouth wide open as she stared blankly at the dark mist. She had seen what had happened just now. It was clear that someone had used some unimaginable divine ability to tear through the void and hurt Patriarch Yuanhua's vital part. But that person was too despicable, as he had actually grabbed Patriarch Yuanhua's vital part. If he were to crush Patriarch Yuanhua's heart or head with his bare hands, wouldn't that mean that he would be destroying his immortal body? If a heaven immortal lost his immortal body, even if his immortal soul could escape, he would be like a tree without roots. With 99% of his overall strength gone, he would be at the mercy of others. Why did the dragon claw do such a strange thing? Wasn't the owner of this dragon claw a little too despicable? Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others were rendered speechless by the strange action of the dragon claw. On the other side, Patriarch Yuanhua's body suddenly trembled, and a threatening blood-red gleam shot out of his eyes. What happened next stunned Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others. Patriarch Yuanhua jumped to his feet with his arms around his crotch, howling at the top of his lungs as he fell to the altar with his arms around his crotch. His body twitched and rolled on the altar, and the pain was so great that snot and tears kept flowing out of his eyes and nose. Immortal cultivators had far better control over their bodies than mortals. Even if his vital part was severely injured, it should not be in such pain. As long as he exercised his cultivation technique to seal off the nearby meridians and nerves, he would not feel any pain at all. Judging from Patriarch Yuanhua's appearance, it did not look like his lower body had been torn apart, but as if someone had chopped his entire body into dumpling stuffing with a large knife. The ground suddenly trembled, and Wu Qi, who had transformed into a 100,000-feet-long dragon python, slowly raised his upper body. With a faint aura of ice and fire bursting out of his eyes, Wu Qi opened his mouth and said with a wry smile, "Why is it so painful? What did you do to me?" Ao Buzan stood on his hind legs on top of Wu Qi's head. "Nothing," he said with a complacent smile. Lao Tzu did not only hurt his fleshly body, but also tore off the corresponding part of his divine soul. Wu Qi's huge body trembled, Suddenly, he raised his tail and slapped Ao Buzan flat on the top of his head. Princess Zhonglu and little Kair came to their senses at the same time. They flew up into the air and looked at Patriarch Yuanhua, who was twitching and howling in horror. They could not help but gasp at the same time. Ao Buzan's dragon-stealing peach hand was truly a vicious move, and many people had been tortured by it in the past. Slowly, Wu Qi's huge body shrank and returned to his human form. He gave Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others on the blood-red cloud a glance, then suddenly breathed out a long sigh and said, "Old Taoist Yuanhua, you reap what you sow. I'll kill you today, and after that, I'll wipe out your entire clan and your bloodline." Patriarch Yuanhua, who was lying on the altar with his lower body in his arms, twitching and howling, suddenly straightened his body. With a hideous smile on his face, he said to Wu Qi, "How can you kill me today? Although I didn't fulfill Senior's request, Senior still gave me a talisman, and he promised to save my life when my life was in danger. Wu Qi will settle this score later." Laughing loudly, a great plume of purple smoke and golden flames suddenly burst out of Patriarch Yuanhua's sleeve. Wu Qi's face flickered as he swung the star shark blade toward Patriarch Yuanhua's head with a great sheet of starlight. At that very moment, a loud boom rang out, and the void 10,000 miles in circumference above Myriad Immortals' planet was shattered by a palm strike. A giant hand, about an acre in circumference, made up of golden light and purple smoke, stretched out of the shattered void at a seemingly slow speed, grabbed Patriarch Yuanhua, and flew up into the sky. Wu Qi was horrified. The giant hand emanated a terrible aura that no one could fight against. Although he had used all his strength, he still could not move. Of all the people present, only Ao Buzan's body trembled, and blood suddenly sprayed out of his body. Accompanied by the sound of bones breaking in his body, Ao Buzan sneakily reached out his front claw and grabbed at the giant hand. The void closed abruptly, and Patriarch Yuanhua disappeared without a trace. In Ao Buzan's claw was an inkstone shrouded in purple smoke. Chapter 645. Above the Nine Heavens. Ever since the primordial era, when the great sages of the primordial era jointly established the heavenly court, the position of the great emperor of the heavenly court had changed countless times. But no matter how the throne was replaced, the celestial court had always remained the same. It was majestic, glorious, and aboveboard, illuminated by purple clouds and golden light all year round. Immortal cranes and cloud dragons danced in the sky, and countless gold immortals and dignitaries came and went on clouds. The atmosphere of the immortals was indescribable. Above the 33 palaces of the celestial court, where the sun and moon shone, was the commonly known Nine Heavens. The Nine Heavens was the interstitial world condensed by the 9 ancient great saints. After countless years of expansion and development, it had now evolved into 9 blessed heavenly realms. The first was the Middle Heaven, the second was the Envy Heaven, the third was the Tsung Heaven, the fourth was the Gung Heaven, the fifth was the Bai Heaven, the sixth was the Open Heaven, the seventh was the Salt Heaven, the eighth was the Shen Heaven, and the ninth was the Cheng Heaven. In the 9 heavens realms, only almighty experts could establish cave abodes. The immortals of the celestial court could not enter the 9 heavens easily, and the immortals in the 9 heavens rarely left it. The 9 heavens corresponded to the 9 realms of primordial immortals, where cave abodes and Taoist rites were established. A 9th-tier primordial immortal who had just stepped into the realm of primordial immortals naturally lived in the lowest middle heaven. An 8th-tier primordial immortal could move his cave abode to the Envy Heaven. By analogy, those who truly possessed the strength of a 1st-tier primordial immortal, whose cultivation base had reached an incredible level and could create and destroy all things, lived in the highest Cheng Heaven. The 9 heavens was vast and boundless, and its mysteries could not be understood by ordinary people. Unless one was in it, it would be difficult to understand the truth. On this very day, somewhere in the middle heaven of the first heaven, amidst the boundless clear air and boundless purple clouds, dozens of mountains, measuring tens of thousands of miles in circumference, were hovering amidst the clear air and purple clouds. Between the mountains were countless palaces and pavilions, each magnificent and luxurious to the extreme. The materials used to build these palaces and pavilions were enough to make heaven immortals and lower-tier gold immortals fight for them with all their might in the outside world. But in here, they were merely used as tiles and bricks. Amidst the tens of mountains, there were at least 100 of these dazzling palaces and pavilions. Above each of the palaces was a purple-gold energy stream, charging up into the sky. That meant there was a gold immortal standing guard inside each of the palaces. Between these palaces and pavilions were countless herb gardens, and the children, gardeners, and servants who came and went were all heaven immortals. Thousands of kilometers above these mountains, there was another green mountain floating in the air. The mountain was no more than 100 miles high and about 300 or 400 miles in circumference. It had an exquisite appearance, like a meticulously crafted brush holder. Looking at it from a distance, it was a delightful sight. On this mountain peak, there were some exquisite wooden houses and bamboo houses that were scattered in a picturesque manner, giving off a natural charm. But on the top of the mountain stood a green jade platform that was 3,600 feet tall and 1,000 feet in circumference, like a huge brush that pierced the sky. At the top of the platform was a simple and unadorned palace. In the square outside the palace, nearly 1,000 beautiful female immortals in luxurious robes were waiting quietly. They looked as if they were carved from jade, standing there silently, motionless, silent, and not even breathing. All of them were carefully restraining all their auras, not daring to show the slightest sign of fatigue or carelessness. The inside of the palace was extremely vast, at least 100 miles in circumference. On the ceiling of the palace, the sun, the moon, and the stars were moving according to the real celestial phenomena, while on the floor was a scene of mountains and rivers. Countless mountains and rivers were hidden on the floor, making it an extremely vast and magical scene. At the end of the palace was a cloud platform, on which sat a middle-aged man in a green robe, staring blankly at a writing table in front of him with a faint smile on his face, which made him look very strange. On the writing table made of white jade, there was a brush, paper, and ink. On the white paper, there was a line of large characters dripping with ink. The characters were magnificent and thick, and faintly exuded a purple aura. The only strange thing was that, among the 4 treasures of the study on the table, an ink stone was missing. There were even a few drops of ink dripping onto the desk. They were like living creatures that were lightly rolling around on the smooth and flawless jade desk. They were as active as mercury beads. Interesting. The middle-aged man smiled and casually placed the brush on the writing rack. With a wave of his finger, the writing table disappeared without a trace. Sitting cross-legged on the cloud platform with a smile on his face, he leaned back on the soft cushion behind him, then nodded at Patriarch Yuan Hua, who was lying in the middle of the palace. "I haven't seen you for so many years. How did you manage to cultivate a cultivation technique of the Fiend League?" Patriarch Yuan Hua stared blankly at the middle-aged man, a blood-red gleam flickering in his eyes. Suddenly, he struggled to his feet, kowtowed and begged the man. "Junior Yuan Hua offers greetings, Senior. I've suffered a lot, and I hope Senior can help me." The middle-aged man laughed. Then, he turned to the 30-odd immortals in Taoist robes standing in the hall and said, "Look, I told you that I've chosen a junior brother for you in the outer heavenly realm, and I was going to take him in when he stepped into the realm of Gold Immortal. In those years, he was cultivating a proper cultivation technique of the Tao League. But after so many years, he has been possessed by the fiend." After a few laughs, the middle-aged man shook his head and said with a sigh, "Not only has he been possessed by the Fiend League, but he was also beaten to this state? Tiske, the injury on your lower body is really strange. Not only your fleshly body was injured, but your soul was also injured. What a strange technique." Tears streamed down Patriarch Yuan Hua's face, and he kept kowtowing and saying, "Please help me, Senior. I was tricked by a few shameless juniors." The middle-aged man twitched his mouth, then shook his head and said, "Juniors? Not necessarily. I personally rescued you, but someone actually followed the traces I left behind and stole my most cherished purple inkstone." Shaking his head and laughing bitterly, the middle-aged man said in a deep voice, I, Lord Lu, am not in a position to pursue this matter. I, a mighty primordial immortal, had my things stolen by a junior from the mortal realm. If word gets out, I won't be able to face anyone again. An old man in a Taoist robe stepped out of the great hall. He bowed and said, Master, why don't you let the disciples handle this matter? Waving his hand, Lord Lu said indifferently, Why are you doing this? The outside world is in a state of chaos. Don't you think it's too troublesome for you to pay a visit? Someone is plotting a big game of chess. With just the strength of me and my 100 disciples, we can't afford to get involved. It's better for us to wait and watch the show, and then get a share of the pie when it's over. If we are really involved, it might be a catastrophe of heaven and earth. His facial muscles twitched a few times, and with a gloomy face, Lord Lu said in a low voice, You haven't experienced it in those years. Every catastrophe of heaven and earth, even many primordial immortals will fall, and even the entire clan of the great emperors of the celestial court will be wiped out. You have no idea how terrible it is. Sighing, Lord Lu looked up at the ceiling and murmured, Your ancestral master, my master, was a famous and almighty figure in those years, and he was also one of the 5 celestial emperors of the celestial court, the immortal who controlled the 5 divisions of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning in the celestial court. But in the last catastrophe, even the great celestial emperor and the 5 celestial emperors of the 5 directions were all killed. Frowning, Lord Lu shook his head and said, At that time, I had 1,897 senior brothers and sisters, all of whom were famous gold immortals. Among them, eldest senior brother and second senior brother had the same cultivation base as me now. But when the catastrophe struck, in just 1,000 years, Master fell, and all my senior brothers and sisters died, leaving me alone. Taking a deep breath, Lord Lu shook his head and said, We still have to retrieve the Purple Heart Inkstone from Yuanhua. Not allowing his disciples to speak, Lord Lu pointed his finger out, and the blood-red flag wrapped around Patriarch Yuanhua soared into the sky and flew into his hand. Lord Lu ran his finger across the flag, and his expression changed abruptly. What a ferocious innate spirit item! What a pity! Who was the one who cut it into this state? What a pity! His eyes flashed like lightning bolts as he gave Patriarch Yuanhua a glance, then cried out in a deep voice, Yuanhua, or Lord Blood Ocean. Yuanhua's true spirit has fused with Lord Blood Ocean's remnant soul. You are actually the same person, and I'm too lazy to care about such a trivial matter. In the end, whether you are Patriarch Yuanhua, Lord Blood Ocean, or ancient celestial fiend Li Shuezi, you are still my little disciple. Patriarch Yuanhua was wild with joy. Hurriedly, he crawled a few steps forward, kowtowed and said, Greetings, Master. Greetings, Master. Master, please uphold justice for this disciple. Lord Lu narrowed his eyes, looking up at the ceiling and pondering for a long while. At last, he nodded slowly and said with a smile, You can help me. But you still have to rely on yourself. I can tell that although the flag is badly damaged, as long as you supply him with enough blood essence, he will be able to restore it to its original state. Patriarch Yuanhua nodded and said, Master, you have a keen eye. That is indeed the case. Lord Lu laughed. With a wave of his hand, he sent the flag back to Patriarch Yuanhua, then laughed aloud and said, Now, there is a good opportunity for you to do something. Panga continent is filled with corpses, and this is the omen of something big, and many people are trying to fish in troubled waters. Just go to Panga continent and do whatever you want. If there is a fortuitous encounter, you will be rewarded. Patriarch Yuanhua was taken aback, then he asked with a trembling voice, What about that fellow Wu Qi? Lord Lu frowned. After counting with his fingers for a full quarter of an hour, his expression changed abruptly. Lord Lu cried out in shock. With my attainment, how could I not be able to divine this lad's fate? Even if there are some almighty experts who have joined forces to disturb the heaven secret, it is only for Wu Qi. According to what you said, he was just a nascent soul junior a few years ago, and those almighty experts are not disturbing the heaven secret for him. How could I not divine his situation? Lord Le tapped his fingers on his knee and said with a smile, "Interesting. Could it be that someone has been targeting him since long ago?" Waving his hand, Lord Le said in a deep voice, "Yuan Hua, you are just a heaven immortal, and I've made an exception to take you as my disciple. You can do whatever you want when you go to Pangu continent. As for Wu Qi, I'll deal with him in the future." Lord Le gave a strange laugh, then looked thoughtfully at the map of mountains and rivers on the floor. "He will definitely go to Pangu continent," he murmured under his breath. "Perhaps it won't be long before you meet him." With a wave of his hand, a dozen gold immortal items, glinting with a faint purple-gold luster, flew before Patriarch Yuan Hua. Lord Le asked Patriarch Yuan Hua to refine these gold immortal items, then casually waved his hand and tore open the void, sending Patriarch Yuan Hua straight to Pangu continent. Chapter 646. How could Wu Qi know anything about what was happening beyond the nine heavens? The world of nine heavens was derived from the interstitial world created by the ancient great saints. Unless one was a primordial immortal, even a peak-level gold immortal could not touch the world of nine heavens without permission. Ordinary immortals did not even know the name of the world of nine heavens, let alone what was happening inside. On Myriad Immortals' planet, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were nervously exercising their divine abilities to create the Myriad Spirits blood pool. The blood pool contained the blood essence of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet. Apart from tens of thousands of longbow people who were lucky enough to survive, and some demons and fiends hiding in the mountains and oceans, all the blood essence of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet was gathered here. After Patriarch Yuan Hua was taken away by Lord Le, the blood pool lost control and was about to explode. Perhaps the explosion would turn the entire planet into ashes. How could Wu Qi allow such a thing to happen? If he sacrificed all the blood essence in the pool, that Lei Meng, the celestial fiend from the outer domain, would have to go to East Sea County to protect Wu Qi? It was difficult to describe the benefits of having such a powerful celestial fiend worshipped in a short time. In short, there were countless benefits. Therefore, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were busy casting all kinds of restrictive spells. One had to prevent the blood pool from exploding, and the other had to prevent the blood pool from drying up. On top of that, the blood pool was filled with a towering aura of resentment. If they did not take good care of it, it would bring about unpredictable disasters. Little Kair stood blankly on Princess Zhongli's head, staring at the blood pool with disgust. The Phoenix bloodline had always been one of the noblest bloodlines in the world. Little Kair's aversion to all kinds of filth had been born in her mother's womb, so how could she tolerate such a foul and filthy blood pool? Ao Buzan, on the other hand, was sitting coiled on a large rock next to the pool of blood, laughing and holding a 2-foot-wide inkstone in his mouth. It was carved with an unknown stone and shrouded in a purple mist, with a silver gleam flashing faintly on its surface. His 2 front paws gently caressed the inkstone, like the most lecherous pervert caressing the tender skin of a young girl. Drool dripped from the corner of his mouth, and his shabby appearance was indescribable. This is too wonderful for words. It was actually an inkstone forged from the purple extreme vast sky stone above the 9th heaven. I can't believe it's an inkstone forged with the method of refining a primordial immortal artifact. Ao Buzan heaved a long sigh and said, "It's a pity that it hasn't formed an item spirit and is just a dead object. But this embryo is the embryo of a primordial unity fairy artifact." Ao Buzan loosened his mouth and weighed the inkstone with both paws, then clenched his jaws and said, "It weighs 360 million kilograms, but I've refined it with the flying feather technique to only weigh 3 taels and 6 jian. Even an ordinary mortal can pick it up easily. As long as I cast it with an incantation, the 4,900 layers of meteor-burning moon formation embedded in the inkstone will increase its weight by another 10,000 times." After calculating with his fingers for a long while, Ao Buzan shook his head and said, "Although it's not a primordial unity fairy artifact, its lethality is still very terrifying. It can easily shatter a star with just one strike. A weight of 36 quadrillion kilogram. Who else can hide such a deadly strike in such a small inkstone if he is not a primordial immortal? Even a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact might not be able to withstand such a head-on strike. Laughing furtively, Aobuzen craned his neck and glanced around. When he found that Wu Qi did not seem to notice him, Aobuzen quickly stuck out his long tongue, carefully made a small incision on the tip of his tongue with the tip of his paw, and dripped a few drops of his blood essence onto the inkstone. What a spendthrift! Why are all those primordial immortals so spendthrift? The bathtub that White Emperor's daughter used to take a bath in years ago was forged with the infinite stone forged with the divine flame of tranquility. But this guy here did not even put a restrictive spell on such an excellent treasure. Isn't he just giving it to Lao Tzu? It's not easy for Lao Tzu to regain his body, and he just happens to lack a powerful weapon to kill and plunder. The pale golden dragon blood transformed into a few twisted runes and fused into the inkstone. Shrouded in a purple mist, the inkstone slowly floated up into the air. Suddenly, it turned into a few plumes of purple smoke and squeezed into Aobuzen's 7 orifices. Aobuzen closed his eyes and quietly comprehended some of the information transmitted over from the purple mist. Suddenly, he cursed under his breath, "Damn it, this purple inkstone has been used as an ordinary inkstone for 3 periods? Such a treasure should be used to kill, set fires, and abduct beauties. How could it be used to draw and write? That's just too stingy." Stroking the inkstone delightedly, Aobuzen stuck out his tongue and gave it a few licks. "Baby, be a good boy and follow me. From now on, I'll have a good life, and I'll have beautiful girls warming my bed every night. It's all thanks to you. When Lao Tzu regains his cultivation base, I'll go to the Holy Land of Dragons and steal a Yuan Ling from my ancestor. I'll make it your item spirit. TSK, you'll be a real primordial immortal item." Wu Qi had just tidied up the 10,000 spirits blood pool. He moved next to Aobuzen, and happened to hear Aobuzen's last words. Wu Qi could not help but roll his eyes. He grabbed Aobuzen and placed him on his shoulder. "You're thinking of digging up your ancestral grave and using your ancestor's Yuan Ling as your item spirit? You're really a filial descendant." Aobuzen laughed, his face not even blushing. He opened his mouth and swallowed the inkstone, then said happily, "Isn't that just recycling waste? Since all of them are dead, leaving Yuan Ling behind will only serve as a tool for future generations to worship, to pass on the divine abilities and mystic techniques of dragons. It's better to let Lao Tzu take advantage of it." Rolling his eyes, Aobuzen said in a low voice, "Are you interested in going to the Holy Land of Dragons together?" In the deepest part of the Holy Land, there are a few corpses of primordial divine dragons, who were born when the world was first created, enjoying the incense offerings there. Their dragon scales, horns, bones, skin, and tendons are all excellent materials for crafting primordial immortal items. Wu Qi's eyes lit up abruptly. He turned to give Xiang Ao a look, then twitched the corner of his mouth into a faint smile. Aobuzen laughed strangely as he gently flicked his 10 front claws, grinding the tips of his claws as if he was very familiar with the technique. Wu Qi suddenly realized that Aobuzen was just too adorable. How could he be so adorable? It was rare to see a descendant who could sell his ancestors' bones and flesh. They exchanged a glance, and then Chi-Chi let out a sneaky laugh. Wu Qi moved to a tree in front of them, then bowed solemnly to Patriarch Jiang Yun, who sat under the tree with a pale face and remained silent. Princess Zhonglu was standing next to Bai Wu. Goddess Qingxia had her arm around Bai Wu's shoulder, and the two of them were whispering something to each other. Wu Qi guessed that it was nothing more than the comforting words between women, and he was too lazy to eavesdrop with his divine ability. Before Patriarch Jiang Yun could react, Qing Xian and his 2 brothers from Tranquil Vimla sect hastily jumped to their feet with a dozen of their disciples, cupping their fists and thanking Wu Qi deeply. Countless words of gratitude were uttered. Qing Xian and the others knew very well that if not for Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli's arrival, perhaps the entire Tranquil Vimla sect would have long been wiped out. These immortals from Tranquil Vimla sect were a little pedantic, and it was impossible for them to submit to Patriarch Yuan Hua and be his accomplices. Therefore, they were doomed to die under Patriarch Yuan Hua's butcher's knife. They had cultivated to the realm of heaven immortals, and if nothing went wrong, they would live a free and unfettered life, never falling into the cycle of transmigration. Wu Qi had saved them from the calamity of having their souls destroyed. Tranquil Vimla sect owed Wu Qi too much. Qing Exin gave Patriarch Wu Qi a look, then clenched his jaw and said resolutely to Wu Qi in a deep voice, "Fellow immortal Wu Qi, Tranquil Vimla sect owes you too much, and it's difficult for us to repay your kindness. If you need any help in the future, Tranquil Vimla sect will obey you without question." Qing Exin could tell that Wu Qi's current divine ability and magic power had exceeded the limit of his imagination. He had met Wu Qi many years ago, and he knew that Wu Qi was not a harsh or tyrannical man. It was a great thing for Tranquil Vimla sect to have Wu Qi as their backer. Wu Qi was overjoyed, and hastily said a few nice words to Qing Exin. Although Qing Exin's cultivation base was not strong, there was nothing much to say about his way of doing things. To put it bluntly, everyone in Tranquil Vimla sect was a group of honest and kind people. If such people were willing to submit to him, it would be a great thing to bring them into underhand sect. They were ready-made heaven immortals, and they could be put to good use with just a little training. So why not? Only then did Patriarch Jiang Yun come to his senses. He sprung to his feet, his face flushed red as he stared at Wu Qi, unable to speak for a long while. After a full quarter of an hour, Patriarch Jiang Yun, whose face had turned as red as a pig's liver, gave a loud roar and dropped to his knees, kowtowing heavily to Wu Qi. "Wu Qi, what I've done this time is against my conscience. In the end, I've harmed others and myself. The death of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet is unforgivable." Patriarch Jiang Yun wailed painfully, "I shouldn't have brought Patriarch Yuan Hua here. I shouldn't have done this. What a pity, what a pity." Wu Qi was taken aback by Patriarch Jiang Yun's action. Without hesitation, he grabbed Patriarch Jiang Yun and shouted, "What does this have to do with Patriarch Yuan Hua? It is Patriarch Yuan Hua's fault. What does it have to do with you?" After capturing a large number of high-ranking disciples of Yuan Hua sect on Green Cliff Planet and White Cloud Planet, Wu Qi had interrogated them with a soul-searching technique. He found out that Patriarch Jiang Yun knew nothing about Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Jiang Yun was a filial and docile person, and everything he did was passive. It was Patriarch Yuan Hua who forced him to come to Myriad Immortals' planet, and it had nothing to do with Patriarch Jiang Yun. Patriarch Jiang Yun had done nothing wrong in this matter. He was just an unlucky fellow who was powerless to resist Patriarch Yuan Hua's violent threat. Besides, Wu Qi knew Patriarch Jiang Yun's character very well. Just like Qing Xin and the other two old Taoists, Patriarch Jiang Yun was an extremely pedantic old man in the world of cultivators, an unlucky fellow who deserved to be set up by others. Wu Qi held Patriarch Jiang Yun and comforted him, then turned to Patriarch Jiang Yun and asked, "Patriarch, I've built up a foundation in the outside world, and the resentment in Myriad Immortals' planet is so strong that it's no longer a good place to live. Would Patriarch be willing to bring your disciples and follow me to start a business?" At this moment, Patriarch Jiang Yun was at his weakest mental state, and Wu Qi had saved his entire clan. He owed Wu Qi a great favor. Then, he glanced around at the Myriad Spirits blood pool, which was 100 times more terrifying than hell. He shuddered, then cupped his fist and bowed respectfully to Wu Qi together with Bai Wu and Qing Xia. Wu Qi laughed joyfully. Both White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect were now in his hands. Chapter 647. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other 6 ancestral masters, together with a total of 24 heaven immortal disciples, had submitted to Wu Qi. Wu Qi was not stingy either. He immediately taught Bai Wu and Qing Xia the cultivation technique of the Dark Yin Water Scripture, then taught Patriarch Jiang Yun, Qing Xin, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi the cultivation technique of the Song of Gale. As for their disciples, they were also taught accordingly. In addition to teaching them the mystic scriptures, Wuqi also used the Tao imparting art of nascent divinity, which was found in the ancient great Tao of Heaven God. At the cost of his own divine soul, he forcibly poured his understanding of the heavenly Tao into their immortal souls, helping them greatly improve their cultivation bases. If it were in the past, Wu Qi would have suffered a great loss of energy if he used the Tao imparting art of nascent divinity, which would greatly harm his future progress. But he had first absorbed the soul power of hundreds of millions of evil spirits on Panga continent, and then obtained the enormous power of fiend souls left behind by Patriarch Yuan Hua in the myriad spirits blood pool. Therefore, although it was very costly for him to use the Tao imparting art, it did not cause him much harm. Patriarch Jiang Yun and dozens of other heaven immortals sat cross-legged beside the blood pool, quietly comprehending the understanding of the heavenly Tao that Wu Qi had taught them. The blood cloud in the sky had disappeared. Wu Qi stood beside the blood pool, with Ao Buzan lying on his head, lazily inhaling and exhaling the purple ink stone, constantly sending his divine will into it to deepen the connection between him and it. Little Kair stood blankly on Wu Qi's shoulder, and this was the expression of the so-called stupefied chicken. From time to time, wisps of flame would spray out of her nostrils. The crimson flame was as clear as melted glass, without any temperature, but it carried a terrible aura that made one's heart tremble. Dressed in a luxurious dress, Princess Zhang Lu stood on the surface of the blood pool with the tip of her foot. Ripples kept spreading out on the mirror-like surface of the pool, with Princess Zhang Li's toes as the center. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, and the piles of corpses around the blood pool kept giving off a foul stench. The blood pool looked so clear under the sunlight that it looked like a huge blood-colored gem, so strangely beautiful that it was suffocating. Wu Qi put his hands under his sleeves and looked up at the sky indifferently. When the sun moved to the middle of the sky, Wu Qi nodded and said, "Zi Xian, you can start." Patting Ao Buzan and little K on the head, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Let Ao Buzan recover some of his strength first, then help little K, purify her bloodline so that she can become a pure-blooded phoenix as soon as possible. After this is done, Ao Buzan, little K, both of you will give me a strand of your bloodline." Ao Buzan and little K responded in unison. Ao Buzan wagged his tail excitedly while little K pecked Wu Qi's head intimately. The myriad spirits blood pool was formed by the blood essence of all the living beings on Myriad Immortals planet, and the amount of blood essence it contained was immeasurable. Sacrificing these blood essences and the nearby corpses to Lei Meng would undoubtedly bring him tremendous power. There was a limit to how much energy Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others could improve, so he decided to let Ao Buzan and little K reap the benefits first. As for Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu, they had already reached the threshold of Gold Immortal Realm, and no external force could help them break through the realm. They could only rely on themselves. Therefore, Wu Qi would not share any of the benefits this time. Judging from the strength of the chaotic dragon body Ao Buzan currently possessed, if this cunning and shameless dragon could obtain most of the power from this sacrifice, to what extent could he recover? Gold Immortal? At least a Gold Immortal? If the power obtained by sacrificing the blood essence and corpses of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals planet could not make a Gold Immortal, then it would be a shame. As Wu Qi spoke, Princess Zhang Lu slowly raised her hands and began to recite the incantation of the blood sacrifice. Gusts of chilly wind came blowing from all directions, causing tiny ripples that looked like fish scales to appear on the surface of the myriad spirits' blood pool. Vaguely, shrill howls could be heard coming out from under the ground, and the sky was covered with dark clouds and mist. The dazzling sun was obscured by the clouds and mist, turning the surroundings gray and hazy. From the hills, lakes, and forests of Myriad Immortals planet, a large number of Yin deities slowly walked out, exercising their divine abilities and flying toward the pool. The incantation of Princess Zhang Lu could not only attract celestial fiends from outer domains, but also mobilize these Yin deities and demonic ghosts. Before long, more than 10 million Yin deities and demonic ghosts had gathered around the pool. Wu Qi exercised his chaotic divine eyes and stared in astonishment at these densely packed Yin deities and demonic ghosts. At the same time, more Yin deities were flying toward the pool along with the chilly wind. Tens of thousands of miles around them were filled with otherworldly items dragging gray halos behind them. Wu Qi shuddered involuntarily, wondering why there were so many mountain spirits and water ghosts on Myriad Immortals' planet. When he thought of the Tao of ghosts and deities that Great Chu cultivated, Wu Qi could not help but wonder if King Yangqiu's father had intentionally placed so many otherworldly items here. Where did he find so many ghosts and deities, and how did he imprison all of them in Myriad Immortals' planet, preventing them from leaving? As Princess Zhonglu recited the incantation, the void above their heads suddenly shook, and the void within about 100 miles around began to ripple like water. Princess Zhonglu murmured Lei Meng's true name, turning it into a strange wave with a spell and sending it into the constantly fluctuating void. A shrill, strange howl rang out as dozens of extremely short ghosts and deities from outer domains rushed out of the void. As soon as these strange-looking ghosts and deities arrived in this world, they let out joyful cries. Hundreds of Yin deities who had gathered together collided with these ghosts and deities. The ghosts and deities roared angrily at first, then burst into a deafening cheer. Whether they were ghosts and deities or the local Yin deities of Myriad Immortals' planet, they were essentially the aggregates of souls, and by devouring each other, they could enhance their overall strength. Princess Zhongli's incantation had gathered all the Yin deities on Myriad Immortals' planet, and there were hundreds of millions of them. The dozens of little ghosts and deities jumped up and down with joy, opening their mouths and inhaling fiercely. Countless shrill howls rang out as the hundreds of millions of Yin deities suddenly discovered these strange creatures from outer domains. They also let out shrill howls like chi-chi, then opened their mouths and inhaled fiercely at the ghosts and deities at the same time. These existences from outer domains were at least 100 times stronger than the Yin deities of Myriad Immortals' planet. But in terms of quantity, they were too few. When hundreds of millions of Yin deities attacked at the same time, the ghosts and deities could only let out a miserable howl before their bodies disintegrated in an instant, turning into countless beams of light that scattered in all directions and were devoured by the surrounding Yin deities. Some of the Yin deities managed to snatch the scattered beams of light. Their bodies suddenly became much clearer, and their overall strength was more than doubled. After tasting the benefits, these Yin deities, who had no intelligence and only acted on instinct, cheered. Then, they transformed into gusts of chilly wind and flew toward the twisting void. They wanted to invade the world where the ghosts and deities lived through the portal, and hunt for the prey that could strengthen them. Bao Buzan rolled his eyes and laughed mockingly. What a bunch of bumpkins! Do they really want to go there and die? Even those ancient great saints dare not to enter the world where the ghosts and deities from outer domains live. You think they can do that? Before Ao Buzan's laughter faded away, a blinding flash of lightning suddenly flashed across the void, and then a fearsome ghost and deity, hundreds of miles tall and shrouded in dark thunderclouds, gradually poked his head out of the void. The projection of Lei Meng's true form slowly descended into this world. How dare a bunch of ants be so rude? TSK, why does it smell so good? What is it that smells so good? Lei Meng's eyes shone with dazzling lightning as he suddenly burst into an earth-shattering cheer. Wonderful! What a generous blood sacrifice! Wonderful! Who is it? Who offered such a generous sacrifice to me? Lei Mao. What do you want? Power or a mystic technique you practice? Tell me, what do you want? Princess Zhonglu floated up into the air and snapped, Lei Meng, do you still remember me? Do you remember your promise? Lei Meng fixed his eyes on Princess Zhonglu. He slapped himself on the head and burst into laughter. It's you, woman. Of course I remember. After 360 sacrifices, I, Lei Meng, have become the ancestral god of your clan. Well, I'm very satisfied with the sacrifice this time. From now on, I, Lei Meng, am the ancestral god of your clan. Sacrifice with all your heart, and I will give you endless benefits. Rubbing his hands greedily, Lei Meng pointed at the hundreds of millions of Yin deities who were fleeing in panic nearby and asked, "Are these little ants also sacrifices?" Wu Qi laughed and said, "If you say so, then so be it. But the few living people by the blood pool are our people." Lei Meng burst into laughter. He waved his hand and said with satisfaction, "I see. That's it." Mountains of corpses flew up into the sky and into the dark clouds around Lei Meng. Wu Qi opened his chaotic divine eyes and saw through the dark clouds. Behind the dark clouds was a vast wasteland filled with thunderclouds, and the corpses were falling toward it. In the wasteland, a huge fiend figure, tens of thousands of miles tall and composed entirely of lightning, was sitting cross-legged, constantly reaching out to grab a large number of corpses and shoving them into its mouth. That huge fiend figure was Lei Meng's true form, right? It was no wonder that his true body could not appear in this world, a gigantic ghost god that was 10,000 miles tall. In just a few breaths of time, countless corpses were sucked dry. Then, monstrous waves rose from the myriad spirits' blood pool, and a great amount of blood soared into the sky and plunged into the thunderclouds. Along with the blood, countless ghosts were sucked away. They let out shrill wails as they were sucked clean by Lei Meng's divine ability. Lei Meng joyfully received all the sacrifices, then burst into laughter and said, "Now, it's time for me, the ancestor god, to give you back. Accept the power. To us, the power you need is just the waste produced after digesting the blood essence. It is of no use to me, but to you, it is too precious." As he laughed wildly, a stream of blood-red light poured down from the sky. In the void, with myriad immortals' planet as the center, countless bolts of lightning were making loud crackling noises, forming a huge thunder formation over 10 million miles in diameter around the planet. A terrible force of thunder was brewing in the formation, and in the center of the thunder formation, directly facing myriad immortals' planet, a huge, merciless eye was slowly opening. A heavenly tribulation had arrived, and it was the myriad thunder wrath that only existed in the legends. Chapter 648. Outside myriad immortals' planet, a huge and frightening thunder formation was taking shape. Although it was huge, its power was contained within. Tiny bolts of lightning interweaved in the void like living creatures, transforming into countless dazzling runes of thunder. Apart from the occasional beeping, there was no other movement in the void. The huge eye of heaven wrath slowly opened, and Lei Meng's figure was reflected in its deep purple-blue pupil. The endless acquired red yang energy of death in the red flaming nether ocean around myriad immortals' planet was constantly being absorbed by the thunder formation, gradually being injected into the eye of heaven wrath, turning into tiny red bolts of lightning and storing in the depths of the pupil. The acquired red yang energy of death within 10,000 miles could only be condensed into a tiny lightning bolt the size of a hair, which showed how powerful it was. 18 immortals clad in green Taoist robes stood in a row above the thunder formation. Each of these immortals had the demeanor of a transcendent being, and their eyes shone brightly like the stars in the night sky. There was a faint clear aura circulating around their bodies. It was obvious that they had cultivated Taoist magic to an extremely profound level. What they cultivated was the orthodox Taoist scriptures, which was not something that those miscellaneous wild fox Diana could compare to. The leader of the group of immortals was an old Taoist with white hair. With hands clasped behind his back, he looked at myriad immortals' planet with a gentle expression and said, "Junior brothers, we've been searching for more than a year, and this is the last of the 13 nests of evil demons recorded in the intelligence report, am I right?" A young Taoist said with a smile, "Indeed. We've been running around for more than a year, and we're all tired. When we're done with this mission, we'll return to Green City and hand in the order. We'll be rewarded handsomely for this meritorious service." The group of immortals roared with laughter, each of them wearing a very proud expression. The old Taoist shook his head and sighed. "Those evil demons are very cunning. I'm afraid this flaming nether ocean was designed by them many years ago. If we hadn't gotten the detailed intelligence report this time, How could we have known that those evil demons were hiding here? The youngest of the 18 immortals looked at the old Taoist curiously. Senior martial brother Zhu Cheng, where did these demons come from? On this trip, we have already destroyed 12 large planets. Including this planet, that will be 13. There are countless civilians on every planet. Do we have to bear the consequences of this slaughter? The old Taoist Zhu Cheng shook his head with a smile and said to the young Taoist, "What do you mean? Subduing demons and devils was a business that accumulated great merit. How could it be sinful? As for the origins of these demons, we'll have to start with our Qingqing ancestral master." The old Taoist Zhu Cheng, who had the demeanor of an elder, was about to explain to his junior martial brothers about the origin of these demons, as well as the great harm they could cause to all heavenly realms, and the fact that if they were left alone, they could cause a great calamity that could wipe out all living beings. But before he could say anything, the Eye of Heaven Wrath had sucked away all the acquired red sun death energy within a radius of millions of miles, and in the pupil was a thunder talisman the size of a rice bucket, glowing faintly and emitting no energy fluctuation. The thunder talisman had a good origin. It was called the 33 Heavens Purple Skies Primordial Clear Sound Divine Thunder. It was a core thunder pattern formed by the heavenly lord of the thunder sect, who controlled all the power of thunder in the world. It was a dharma artifact of the thunder sect that was passed down from the ancient times and gathered all the power of the 800 immortal lords under the thunder sect. The so-called core thunder talisman was actually a seed of thunder magic. Once it was stimulated, it could automatically extract the surrounding natural energy and inject it into the thunder talisman, which would eventually evolve into a terrible heaven wrath with a power so great that it could destroy a planet. The 18-old Taoist Zhu Cheng and his companions had obtained 13 thunder talismans from their seniors, each of which could destroy a planet and wipe out all the living beings on it. If one of the thunder talismans missed its target, Zhu Cheng and his companions would have to kill it themselves. However, Zhu Cheng did not think it was possible for the thunder talisman to miss its target. The Eye of Heaven Wrath in the Void was a gold immortal item created by the Thunder sect of the Celestial Court based on the legendary divine item of the Heavenly Tao. The Eye of Heaven Wrath was like the barrel of a gun, and the Thunder Talisman was like the bullet in the barrel. When the two were combined, it could unleash a strike that was comparable to that of a gold immortal. How could the power of a gold immortal miss its target? It was clearly stated in the intelligence that the strongest cultivators in these 13 layers were merely peak-stage nascent divinity realm. Using the power of a gold immortal to fight a nascent divinity cultivator was like using a cannon to kill a mosquito. If it were not for the purpose of completely wiping out the weeds and eliminating the root of the problem, how could the Thunder sect give such an important artifact of the Celestial Court to Zhu Cheng and his companions? There were only 108 copies of the Eye of Heaven Wrath created by the Thunder sect in the entire Celestial Court. When they were combined, they formed the 33 Heavens Purple Skies Qian Yuan Thunder Zhou demon-slaying formation of the Thunder sect of the Celestial Court. It was an important artifact of the Celestial Court, and could not be easily taken out of the Celestial Court. Old Taoist Zhu Cheng felt very proud to be able to bring an Eye of Heaven Wrath with him and use the lightning pattern of the 33 Heavens Violet Night Qian Yuan Clear Sound Zhu Ming Divine Thunder to kill more than a dozen stars. If he could complete this task perfectly, he would definitely be handsomely rewarded when he returned to the sect. Heaven Wrath of 10,000 Thunders. Zhu Cheng laughed out loud. Although it is not the real Heaven Wrath of 10,000 Thunders generated by the Heavenly Tao, it is just an imitation of the divine thunder of Heaven Wrath by the Thunder sect. But even after watching it over 10 times, I still can't get tired of it. Junior brothers, take a closer look. This divine thunder of Heaven Wrath is filled with countless mysteries. If you can comprehend one or two of them, it will bring great benefits to the thunder art of Green City. There was no need for old Taoist Zhu Cheng to say anything. The group of Taoists all stared fixedly at the Eye of Heaven Wrath. They looked as if they wanted to rush down and hug the Eye of Heaven Wrath so that they could figure out its secrets. While the group of old Taoists were staring at the Eye of Heaven Wrath, the Thunder Talisman, which had accumulated enough power of thunder, had silently shot out from the Eye of Heaven Wrath. The Thunder Talisman had absorbed the acquired red yang qi of death within a circumference of millions of miles, and the thunderbolts it condensed into were extremely violent and violent. However, when the Thunder Talisman shot out of the Eye of Heaven Wrath, it gave everyone a feeling that it was slow and gentle, like a gentle and leisurely scholar or lady going for an outing in the early spring. After that, countless thunderbolts shot out of the Eye of Heaven Wrath, causing the entire thunder formation to tremble violently. Wave after wave of thunderbolts followed closely behind the Thunder Talisman and swept toward Myriad Immortals' planet. However, these thunderbolts, which were filled with an aura of destruction, slowly descended from the sky. Just like the Thunder Talisman, they were filled with an indescribably gentle aura. Tens of thousands of miles thick bolts of lightning gently enveloped the entire Myriad Immortals' planet, wrapping it up tightly and securely. The Thunder Talisman, which had absorbed countless acquired red yang qi of death, slowly flew into Myriad Immortals' planet's atmosphere, heading toward Lei Meng, who had the strongest magical power and aura on the planet. The tens of thousands of miles thick thunderbolts outside Myriad Immortals' planet began to compress inwardly, pressing closer to the ground. Gradually, they shot out countless tiny light threads, which attached themselves to the Thunder Talisman. On the surface of Myriad Immortals' planet, Lei Meng was sprinkling a vast amount of blood-red light. As Lei Meng had said, the ghosts and deities of the outer heavenly realms were completely different from the immortals. They devoured blood essence and souls, just like how humans ate food. It was their physiological need, and also the best way for them to improve their overall strength. But after they digested the blood essence, souls, and flesh, their bodies would absorb the energy they needed, and at the same time, release a great deal of waste. It was like when a human ate, there would be something to defecate, or when a human breathed, there would be carbon dioxide expelled. The waste released by Lei Meng and the others was the purest immortal energy and natural energy. Lei Meng and the other ghosts and deities from the outer heavenly realms were the best energy converters. As long as they were provided with enough offerings, they would be able to give back sufficient immortal energy and natural energy, bringing great benefits to the person who offered them. That was exactly what was happening at the moment. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other 30 immortals from the two sects were hovering in midair, with the blood-red light constantly fusing into their bodies. Their faces were filled with both pain and pleasure, and the immortal energy in their bodies was growing rapidly at a speed that they dared not even dream of. Especially after Wu Qi had forcibly improved their cultivation base at the cost of his divine soul. Although the immortal energy was pouring into their bodies at an extremely fast speed, their immortal bodies were actually able to withstand the mighty immortal energy. Next to them were Little Kaer and Ao Buzan. Little Kaer kept swallowing and spitting out blood-red light. Her feathers were standing on end, falling off and growing back at the same time. Her body was wrapped in a glistening ring of Nanmingli fire. As the blood-red light continued to pour into her body, the color of the fire became clearer and redder, thicker and thicker, and the temperature of her skin was getting higher and higher. Ao Buzan's change was the greatest. A large inkstone hovering over his head was greedily devouring the blood-red light that sprinkled mainly on his body. His body had expanded to 10,000 feet long, with dark smoke billowing around him and a towering murderous aura. The scales on his body kept breaking, but they quickly healed. Every now and then, loud noises of bones and tendons breaking could be heard coming from inside his body. At the same time, his body was twitching and convulsing, but the broken bones and tendons kept healing themselves. After recasting his dragon body in a short period of time and forcibly pushing the dragon transformation script to evolve into the true dragon transformation of the Gold Immortal realm, the severe pain almost made Ao Buzan faint. However, this lecherous dragon was extremely fierce to himself. While spitting out flames, he kept murmuring under his breath. The words he murmured made Princess Zhang Li's pretty face turn purple and swollen. She wished she could strangle this lowly dragon to death. Only by going through the most bitter hardships can one rise above all others. Rise above all others, rise above all others, rise above all others. Apart from master's women, Lao Tzu wants to ride on all the women under the heavens. This is what they mean by rise above all others. Hurry up and restore the magical power and divine ability that Lao Tzu had in those years. Lao Tzu must become a rise above all others. Just you wait, those bastards who pulled out all the tendons and bones of Lao Tzu in those years. Heaven bless you, you must give birth to many daughters and granddaughters in these years, and it would be best if you have countless great-granddaughters and great-granddaughters. Wherever Lao Tzu's spear passes through, I'll make all your clans suffer. Amidst Ao Busan's nonsense, the thunder mark, which was about the size of a rice bucket and had an elegant luster that looked like it was carved out of amethyst, slowly drifted towards Lei Meng's head, dragging countless tiny electric threads behind it. Lei Meng raised his head in surprise and grabbed the tiny thunder mark with one hand. What the hell is this? Strange, why is this place surrounded by thunderbolts? Chapter 649. Wu Qi was dumbfounded, while Princess Zhonglu was tongue-tied. Ao Busan stared fixedly at Lei Meng and cried out, "Monster! I can't believe you've eaten all the thunder marks of the Thunder Clan. Well then, senior, why don't you eat all the thunderbolts in the sky? Look at all these thunderbolts. How many years of hard cultivation will they last?" Lei Meng, on the other hand, waved a hand into the sky and grabbed a huge eye that was 36 miles long, surrounded by dark clouds and faintly emitting purple-blue electric arcs. It was crystal clear and looked like it was made of gemstones. Lei Meng casually made a grabbing motion. No one knew what restrictive spell he had used, but it shrunk the eye to about an inch long, then he threw it to Wu Qi. Little Kair did not know much about this telescreen. Just like Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu, she was so frightened by the terrible power contained in the telescreen that her feathers stood on end, and her body, which was already as round as a ball, became even fatter. Ao Busan nearly choked on his own saliva. Damn it! What the hell did Lao Tzu do? He roared at the top of his voice. Why is there a myriad thunder wrath? Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu looked up anxiously, and only then did they realize that the entire myriad immortals planet had been enveloped by the thick and silent telescreen. Words could not describe the terrible pressure that came from the tens of thousands of miles thick and sticky curtain as it slowly approached the ground. Wu Qi only knew that his body was stiff with fear, and even his divine soul had gone stiff. He could not think of any way to deal with it. However, it was useless to Lei Meng. Therefore, both Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu had no choice but to inject the energy they obtained into their interstitial worlds, turning the enormous blood-red energy into the energy source for the growth of their interstitial worlds. With the help of this energy, their interstitial worlds underwent a tremendous change, but the atmosphere was very different from just now. Amidst Ao Busan's hysterical howl, Lei Meng grabbed the falling thunder mark and brought it to Wu Qi and the others. "What is this?" he asked, puzzled. "Did your enemies come knocking on our door?" The power of thunder contained in this talisman is not simple, and your cultivation base is not very strong. How did you offend such a powerful enemy?" Wu Qi looked at the thunder mark without saying a word, while Ao Busan rolled his eyes and nearly fainted. He howled at the top of his voice, "Don't put this thing in front of Lao Tzu. Heaven, Lady of Earth, do you know what this is? This is a deadly thing." Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu exchanged a glance. They knew very well that King Yangqiu's father's plan had been exposed, and someone was attacking King Yangqiu through the celestial court. Years ago, it was the people of Green City who had ruined King Yangqiu's father's plan, and now, it was the people of Green City who had come to uproot him. After pondering for a long time, they still could not figure out the identity of the person behind this. Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu exchanged a glance and shook their heads at the same time with a wry smile. It took Lei Meng less than the time it took to finish a pot of tea for him to absorb the electric curtain in the sky. After that, he swallowed it all in one gulp, then made a grabbing motion with one hand. The void shattered, and a dozen immortals clad in Taoist robes were pulled out from the void with cries of alarm. While laughing, Lei Meng swallowed a few of the immortals, who had fair skin and looked rather young. After that, he slapped Taoist Cheng and the other two, who looked the oldest, in front of Wu Qi. He could not believe that they had brought an Eye of Heaven wrath crafted by the Thunder Sect to destroy 13 planets inhabited by evil demons. Holding the Eye of Heaven wrath in his hand, Wu Qi could not make a sound for a long time. There was no response from the telescreen. Wu Qi's full force strike had merged into the screen, but it was like a drop of water falling into the vast ocean. It did not cause any ripples. The thick electric curtain continued to slide down slowly with an aura of destruction. Inch by inch, it was like the descent of night, wiping out all hope in time. Wu Qi stood there stiffly, with cold sweat breaking out from all over his body like raindrops. The only thing worth investigating was, who had found out these secrets? And who had given them to the celestial court? Opening his mouth, Lei Meng sucked in a deep breath at the electric curtain that was slowly falling down from the sky. Amidst a shrill squeaking noise, countless electric arcs plunged into his mouth like streams of water. Wu Qi exercised his chaotic divine eyes and saw that after the lightning bolts rushed into Lei Meng's mouth, they were instantly teleported to the wasteland on the other side. Sitting cross-legged on the wasteland, Lei Meng's true form was performing a strange incantation gesture with both hands as all the lightning bolts kept pouring into his forehead. Lei Meng laughed heartily and nodded. "You're right. The thickness of the electric curtain here is 10,000 miles, roughly equivalent to the power of 300 years of my cultivation. Hee, I never thought that I would not only enjoy a blood sacrifice this time, but also receive such great benefits. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony." Little Kair and Ao Buzan opened their eyes at the same time, looking up at the falling electric curtain. Zhu Cheng and his two junior brothers were pulled down from the sky by Lei Meng, and then slapped to the ground with a heavy slap. Their heads were dizzy from the fall, and they felt a sharp pain in their bones and tendons. All of a sudden, they were kicked in the face by Wu Qi, knocking all their teeth out. When Zhu Cheng saw his junior brothers being swallowed by Lei Meng, he could not help but cry out in a trembling voice, "Junior brothers! You've all died a miserable death." Wu Qi glared at Zhu Cheng with his eyes burning with rage. "What enmity do you have with me? Why did you plot against me with this kind of thunder magic?" He snapped. The more Wu Qi thought about the terrible pressure when the electric curtain fell just now, the more he thought about it, the more furious he became. So, he gave Zhu Cheng a hard kick in the face. With a panicked look on her face, Princess Zhonglu let out a clear cry. The five-colored divine ray behind her suddenly spun and soared up into the sky, transforming into a sheet of dazzling light that swept across the electric curtain that was descending from the sky. A faint rumble of thunder rang out, and the five-colored divine ray unleashed by Princess Zhonglu shattered with a boom. Princess Zhonglu staggered a few steps back, with blood oozing out of her 7 orifices. Lei Meng fiddled with the terrible thunder mark, which was powerful enough to wipe out all the living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet with one strike. Finally, he shook his head, opened his mouth, and shoved the thunder mark into his mouth. A muffled boom rang out as dark clouds suddenly emerged from his body, and the number of lightning bolts and thunderbolts increased by a few times. Lei Meng praised delightedly, "What a delicious taste! It's even better than the magic power I gained after 100 years of arduous cultivation." Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu exchanged a glance and shook their heads at the same time. Ao Buzan was trembling with fear, and he was indeed a man with an extremely bad character. He was so scared that tears were coming out of his eyes, and his lower body kept farting one after another. It was as if he was scared out of his wits. He howled, "Lao Tzu will not accept this. Lao Tzu has just regained his fleshly body, and Lao Tzu's cultivation base has yet to recover. Lao Tzu is still a dragon boy. Lao Tzu will not accept this." Born in Green City, he was the personal disciple of the Green City Patriarch, and served as the heaven-patrolling emissary of the Celestial Court. Just like the embroidered uniform guards that Wu Qi knew, the heaven-patrolling emissary was a special emissary sent by the great Celestial Emperor. In outer heavenly realms he was one level higher than any immortal monarch or heavenly monarch, and had the power to kill first and report later. Completely out of instinct, Wu Qi's stiff body suddenly swung his fist. Countless thunderbolts, a great sheet of cold air, a monstrous fiend flame, and a green saberhorn hurricane turned into a mass of chaotic energy and shot whistling up into the sky, smashing straight toward the curtain that was slowly pressing down from the sky. This treasure is interesting. It can absorb all the natural energy in the world and use it to hurt people. I, Lei Meng, am the Lord of Lightning, born with a natal magical artifact. I have no use for this treasure, so I'll just give it to you as a reward for the blood sacrifice. Blinking his eyes, Ao Buzan suddenly burst into laughter. It's fine. This is not the real Myriad Thunder Heavenly Tribulation, but a fake made by the Thunder Department of the Celestial Court. This strike is at most equal to the full force strike of a 12th tier gold immortal. It is far weaker than the real Myriad Thunder Heavenly Tribulation. The real Myriad Thunder Heavenly Tribulation unleashed by the Heavenly Tao can even kill a primordial immortal. Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu exchanged a glance and smiled bitterly. Their cultivation base had reached the limit that their bodies could bear. What they needed now was not the accumulation of magic power, but the improvement of their cultivation base. Lei Meng had injected them with a large amount of blood-red light, which was transformed into a surging magic power that poured into their bodies like a great river. But in fact, it did not do them much good. The star shark blade flew up, and the heads of Zhu Cheng and his 2 junior brothers flew up into the sky in a stream of blood. 3 bloody immortal souls soared up into the sky and were about to flee, but a few ghost flames shot out from Princess Zhongli's fingertips and trapped them in midair. Shrill cries rang out from their souls. With the soul-searching technique of the Tao of ghosts and deities, Princess Zhonglu had squeezed out a great deal of memories from their souls. Had it not been for Wu Qi, an anomaly who had turned the situation on Myriad Immortals' planet upside down, the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties would have long left the planet to develop themselves in the outside world. With the thunderous strike of Zhu Cheng and his companions, all the living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet would have been crushed to pieces, and all the arrangements made by King Yangqiu's father would have been turned to dust. In just the blink of an eye, a dazzling light burst out of Lei Meng's body, and his projection on Myriad Immortals' planet had grown twice as large as before, as if he had just eaten a great tonic. The blood-red light sprinkling down from his palms became several times denser. Not only did the blood-red light pour into the bodies of Patriarch Jiang Yun and his companions, Ao Buzan and Little Care, but it also went into Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu with a deafening rumble. Zhu Cheng, who was coughing up blood, glanced around, and when he saw the blood in the pool of blood and the skeletons nearby, he could not help but scream, "Blood sacrifice? How many people have you killed as a blood sacrifice for the fiends from outer domains? The Celestial Court has explicitly forbidden the blood sacrifice of fiends from outer domains. Are you really not afraid of the punishment from the Celestial Court?" Wu Qi grabbed Ao Buzan by the neck and snapped, "Nonsense! Do we have any gold immortals here to defend against the full force strike of a 12th tier gold immortal?" Laughing wildly, Lei Meng pointed at Zhu Cheng and the other 2 old immortals and said, "They are the ones who are playing tricks. If I were not here, this thunderbolt of theirs would have killed all the living beings here, and even this planet would have been destroyed. These 3 are the managers, and I won't stand on ceremony with the rest. You can consider the flesh and blood that you brought to me as your blood sacrifice." Ao Buzan's long dragon whiskers straightened as he howled in a hoarse voice, "Heavens, Lao Tzu has forgotten that Lao Tzu does not have the cultivation base he once had. This is the eye of heaven's wrath forged by the Celestial Court's Thunder Sect. In those days, Lao Tzu thought it was nothing, but now Lao Tzu is going to die here, and his soul will be destroyed, never to be reincarnated." Apart from the core secrets of their immortal souls that were related to their own cultivation techniques, which prevented the soul-searching technique from being used to find out the various scriptures of their sects, Princess Zhonglu had interrogated them about their origins, their identities, and their mission. Chapter 650. Lei Meng, a ghost from another domain, had a rather careless temper. He threw the Eye of Heaven Wrath, a precious treasure of the celestial court, to Wu Qi, devoured all the offerings, and then turned to leave. Fortunately, before he left, he still remembered to remind Wu Qi to offer him some offerings every few days. Otherwise, Wu Qi would really suspect that this fellow would turn his back on Wu Qi after he had reaped enough benefits this time. The Eye of Heaven Wrath, shrouded in dark clouds and emitting faint thunderbolts, felt heavy in his hand. Even with Wu Qi's current physical strength, he still felt the 1-inch-long, transparent eye forged with some unknown material was heavy. It was heavy, strong, hard, and slippery, and when he held it in his hand, he could feel tiny electric currents constantly stimulating his palm muscles, making him feel a burning sensation in his hand. He wished he could throw it away as soon as possible. Just now, he had obtained all the information about the Eye of Heaven Wrath from Zhu Cheng's memory with the soul-searching technique. It was a precious treasure of the Thunder Department of the Celestial Court, and would not leave the hall unless there was something important. Without this Eye of Heaven Wrath, the Thunder Division's most powerful Demon Buster array would be incomplete. Originally, the Demon Buster array would be able to unleash 100% of its power. Now, only 10% of its power would remain. In other words, without this Eye of Heaven Wrath, 90% of the strongest means of the Thunder Department of the Celestial Court would be crippled. The loss of 90% of the strongest combat force was enough to throw all the officials of the Thunder Department of the Celestial Court into a mess. If the Celestial Emperor in charge of the Thunder Department, the North Pole Celestial Emperor of the 5 Directions and 5 Imperial Celestial Emperors, learned of this, at least half of the officials of the Thunder Department would have to pay a visit to the Immortal Flaying Platform, where their immortal bodies and immortal souls would be destroyed, and their souls would be reincarnated again. Whether they could still cultivate to become immortals in their next lives, or occupy a high position in the Celestial Court, was something that only God knew. Without this treasure, those Star Lords, Heavenly Lords, and Immortal Lords of the Thunder Division will go crazy. Wu Qi laughed strangely. Princess Zhonglu also looked at the Eye of Heaven's Wrath in Wu Qi's hand, not knowing what to do with this hot treasure. It would be a pity to discard it. When used alone, the power of this Eye of Heaven Wrath was no weaker than an upper-grade gold immortal artifact. Moreover, thunder was the command of the heaven and earth, the most powerful force in the world. With the Eye of Heaven Wrath in hand, it would bring endless benefits to an immortal cultivator. At least, he would not have to worry about the invasion of evil fiends. However, if he kept this treasure in his hands and the Thunder Clan pursued the matter, it would be a huge problem. The Thunder Department of the Celestial Court was the most powerful department among all the departments of the Celestial Court. It was the most powerful and influential department, with many experts and the most powerful potential force. From Zhu Cheng's memory, Wu Qi knew that the Thunder Department was directly under the jurisdiction of the Northern Celestial Emperor, and the 2 immortal kings under him were in charge of the daily affairs of the department. The 2 immortal kings were only nominally in charge of everything. The ones who really took care of the affairs of the Thunder Division were the 12 Heavenly Lords of the Thunder Division, who were on duty on a monthly basis, and the 800 immortal lords under each Heavenly Lord, who were also on duty on a monthly basis. In addition to that, the Thunder Department was also responsible for punishing the immortals of the Celestial Court who had violated the taboo, and their power was so great that it made one's scalp go numb just thinking about it. There were more than 100,000 immortals of the Thunder Department who were in charge of this department. The number of immortal officials and immortal officials attached to the various departments and departments of the Thunder Department was truly uncountable. Weighing the Eye of Heaven Wrath in his hand, Wu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "Zi Xian, if a farmer from Great Yen rushed to Great Yan's scouting office, beat the chief supervisor of a wind guard, and robbed him of his seal, what would the scouting office do?" Princess Zhonglu stared fixedly at the Eye of Heaven Wrath, gritted her teeth, and said with a cold snort, "Of course, they would search the world, capture him alive, cut him into pieces, and wipe out his entire clan. If he still can't vent his anger, he might even implicate his neighbors. Or he might even slaughter the entire city and village. It's an easy and normal thing to do. Holding the Eye of Heaven Wrath tightly in his hand, Wu Qi said coldly, "This is it. If the immortals of the Thunder Department learned that the Eye of Heaven Wrath was taken away, and the heaven patrolling emissaries they sent here were killed, we will be in big trouble." Pointing his finger at the sky, Wu Qi said with a smile, "Green City must have learned the news of Zhu Cheng's death by now, and perhaps they are sending an official report to the Heaven Lords in charge of the scouting office. I reckon that in a few days, the heaven patrolling emissaries will come here to investigate the news. We have to leave this place as soon as possible." Princess Zhangli glanced at Wu Qi's hand and said in a low voice, "Aren't you afraid that the Eye of Heaven Wrath will burn your hand?" Wu Qi shook his head and said coolly, "How can I throw away the treasure that I have obtained? Lei Meng has broken all the restrictive spells in it, and all 1080 tracking arrays have been completely broken. This treasure is ours now. How can I throw it away? A thief never returns empty-handed, and I will never return the treasure that I have obtained." A chaotic light swirled in Wu Qi's left eye, and then a beam of hazy light shot out of it, slowly dragging the Eye of Heaven Wrath into Wu Qi's eyes. He chuckled and said, "My chaotic divine eyes can refine all kinds of natural energies and extraordinary treasures to improve themselves. When I refine this Eye of Heaven Wrath and fuse all its essence into my eyes will also have the divine ability of the Eye of Heaven Wrath, and I won't have to worry about exposing myself." Princess Zhangli nodded her head pleasantly. Smilingly, she looked at Wu Qi's left eye, which had turned purplish blue. Carefully, she reached out her hand and touched the eyeball, where electric sparks were seeping out from time to time. Princess Zhangli was delighted that Wu Qi had such a way to deal with the loot. Although they had only obtained one Eye of Heaven Wrath, Princess Zhangli had already begun to plan how to let Wu Qi absorb all 108 Eyes of Heaven Wrath. After the blood sacrifice was completed, Wu Qi immediately exercised his divine ability and destroyed all traces of the blood pool. Princess Zhangli had disturbed the surrounding void with her divine ability, so that no other immortals could find Lei Meng by following the traces of the blood sacrifice. After that, they began to extract the energy veins from Myriad Immortals Planet using the same old method as Green Cliff Planet and White Cloud Planet. All the beautiful sceneries and scenic spots on Myriad Immortals Planet were also plundered and stuffed into their interstitial worlds. This was the greatest manifestation of the damage that immortal cultivators had done to the natural world. Interstitial worlds were the foundation of immortals. If they wanted to develop and strengthen their interstitial worlds, it would take years and months for the immortals to grow their interstitial worlds by themselves. Therefore, once an immortal cultivated his interstitial world, his ability to plunder resources from the outside world would reach a frightening level. A planet with decent energy veins could support 30 to 50 heaven immortals for their cultivation. However, a gold immortal would need the support of at least several or even dozens of outer heavenly realms to be able to continue his cultivation smoothly. Not only did gold immortals have to satisfy the growth of their immortal energy, but they also had to satisfy the needs of their interstitial worlds. He had worked hard to develop a world in his interstitial world. After spending 2 days and 2 nights, Wu Qi and Princess Zhangli had plundered everything on Myriad Immortals Planet, moving all the mines and mineral veins into their interstitial world. After that, Wu Qi turned to the secret cave where he found the Silver Lotus. With the blood sacrifice of Lei Meng, the blood essence and corpses of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals Planet had been exchanged for a tremendous power. With the help of Lei Meng, Ao Buzan, the lascivious dragon, had safely crossed the threshold of Gold Immortal Realm. His overall strength was far beyond that of a Gold Immortal, and what he lacked now was nothing more than magic power and cultivation base. Therefore, with the support of sufficient magic power, Ao Buzan was able to steadily advance to the 18th tier Gold Immortal Realm. With Ao Buzan's help, and Wu Qi's guidance, Ao Buzan easily cracked the outer dimension Great Void Formation, and obtained the Black Pearl in the formation. Without having the time to carefully identify the origin and function of the pearl, Wu Qi and his company left Myriad Immortals Planet in a hurry. 3 days after Wu Qi and his company left Myriad Immortals' planet, thousands of thunderbolts suddenly poured out of the void. Riding on thunderbolts, a large group of ferocious immortals plunged toward Myriad Immortals' planet, smashing it to pieces. As Wu Qi had expected, the Immortals of Thunder Sect had come to search the entire planet in a hurry. But by this time, Wu Qi and his company had already arrived at the planet where Yen Dan and the others were. Chapter 651. It was a small and remote starfield. Even the immortal monarch who was in charge of this starfield had forgotten that there was such a remote and barren place here. According to Wu Qi, this was a small planetary system, slightly smaller than the solar system where Earth was located. It had a slightly white sun, with 4 planets orbiting around it, and one of them had life on it. That was all. Originally, there were a few lowly itinerant cultivators on this small planet, bullying and enslaving tens of millions of ordinary people. These few itinerant cultivators, whose cultivation base was around the realm of nascent soul, had been living a comfortable life. But ever since Yen Dan brought many civil and military ministers of Great Yen, a group of elite soldiers and a large number of carefully selected elites to this planet, these itinerant cultivators had met with great misfortune. All the cultivators were killed, and the dozens of small kingdoms in the mortal world were wiped out in just one day. All the members of the royal family were beheaded. Great Yen had completely occupied the planet, and had quickly established various government offices. The countless civil and military ministers brought here by Yen Dan were the absolute elites of Great Yen, and even the ordinary people who came with them were the best elites of Great Yen. Therefore, in just a few years, this place had developed very well. The capital city of Great Yen on this planet was still named Ji City. The city wall, measuring tens of miles in both width and length, stood towering over the vast wilderness like a long dragon. The carefully selected wilderness was extremely fertile, and was now crisscrossed with crisscrossing paths. Countless farmlands had been opened up, and tens of thousands of villages, towns, and cities had been built on it. In this brand new place, the people of Great Yen were resting and building up their strength bit by bit. In the drill grounds of military camps of various sizes outside Ji City, groups of soldiers were practicing the body-tempering technique of the human race that was brought back from Pangu continent. In outer heavenly realms, the mysterious purple mist was extremely rare. But, because of the special nature of the cultivation technique of the human race, these soldiers who had just joined the army not long ago already had some overall strength, and looked like an elite army. Some of the more outstanding soldiers had tempered their bodies to the point that they could compete with body cultivators of Jindan realm. The efficiency of their cultivation was extremely amazing. If these soldiers were brought back to Pangu continent, perhaps in just a few years, they could cultivate to a frightening overall strength that could compete with heaven immortals. Leading a group of people, Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu flew all the way here, looking down at the current situation of Great Yen. They could not help but keep nodding their heads. When they scanned the drill grounds outside Ji City with their divine will, they found that there were about 3 million soldiers practicing the cultivation technique of the human race. After carefully calculating the proportion of soldiers, Wu Qi could not help but feel speechless. On Pangu continent, a 9th grade province like Great Yu could only recruit a few hundred soldiers to guard it. Even Zhong province, a 1st grade province under Feng Lingling's rule, could only muster a little over 300,000 soldiers. Even Zhong province, a 1st grade province, could only muster about 300,000 soldiers, and Feng Lingling could only muster about 300,000 soldiers. What was the total population of Great Yen now? Yen Dan was indeed a generous man. The military strength of Great Yen was nearly 10 times greater than that of a 1st grade province like Zhong province. When he thought about the faces of those prefecture overseers, grand oracles, military ministers, and all the officials and generals on Pangu continent, and then looked at the 3 million elite soldiers training crazily outside Ji City, Wu Qi suddenly had a very strange illusion that Pangu continent was a flock of lambs, and he, Wu Qi, was about to throw 1 or even 6 beasts into the flock of lambs. If the heroes of the six dynasties had the same resources as Pangu continent, and given enough time, what could they do? Most importantly, Wu Qi had brought the method to break the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse, so King Yangshan and King Yangqiu could no longer control the people of the six dynasties. Princess Zhonglu and Wu Qi had a telepathic connection, and they thought of the same problem almost at the same time. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. They had a tacit understanding. The two beams of light descended in Ji City and landed in front of the imperial palace. Before the imperial guards could scold them, Princess Zhonglu and Wu Qi had thrown out their tokens of 9 swallows, falling right into the hand of the leader of the imperial guards. At the sight of the 2 tokens, the imperial guards dropped to their knees. Qi bowed deeply to Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu. Wu Qi paid no attention to them. He circulated his energy and focused his mind, sending a wisp of his voice into the palace. Your Majesty, Wu Qi and Zi Xian are back. We have found the method to break the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse. After a moment of silence, countless sword beams suddenly soared into the sky from the depths of the imperial palace. Amidst one of them was a 1,000-feet-long golden sword beam, in which Yen Dan, clad in a black robe, was flying at top speed, laughing aloud. In just the blink of an eye, Yen Dan, Sun Kuang, Mod, Han Fei, Jing Ku, Tian Guang, Fan Yuqi, Qin Weiyang, and the other emperors and ministers of Great Yen had surrounded Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu. On the contrary, Patriarch Jiang Yun and his company, who were following behind Wu Qi, paid no attention to them at all. The news that Wu Qi had found the method to break the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse had occupied all the thoughts of Yen Dan and others, and they had no time to pay attention to other people and things. As long as the restrictive spell in their nascent divinity was removed, as long as the damned restrictive spell that would last for generations, even for their descendants, they would be able to fly freely in the vast sky and swim freely in the vast ocean. With the abilities of Yen Dan and the others, where couldn't they go? What was the big deal about a small planet? They were really going to turn this world upside down. It was Xiang Yu, one of the men from the six dynasties, who dared to say in public when he saw Ying Zheng's chariot, "I can replace him." And Ying Zheng, who Xiang Yu said could be replaced, was a mighty overlord who swept across the world and wished he could trample the heaven and earth under his feet. In this vast and boundless world controlled by the immortals and the human race, if these heroes of the six dynasties did not turn this world upside down, replace those lofty figures, and trample the heaven and earth under their feet, what kind of heroes were they? What kind of heroes were they? Even if they were facing the mighty immortals, even if they were facing the mighty powers that had been passed down from the ancient times. Just like what Xiang Yu had said, "I can replace him." How could these proud and arrogant heroes, especially Sun Kuang and Mod, allow their nascent divinities to be controlled by someone else? If it were not for the fact that they did not even have the freedom to commit suicide, and that their souls would be controlled by someone after they died, people like Sun Kuang and Mod would have killed themselves long ago to seek true liberation. Therefore, when Wu Qi came back and told them that he had brought them the method to free themselves, Yen Dan and others could not help but be excited. The emperor and courtiers of Great Yen escorted Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu into the imperial palace, where a banquet was held in the great hall to celebrate. Yen Dan and others were very experienced. Although they were delighted that Wu Qi had brought them the mystic technique to solve the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse, none of them showed the slightest anxiety. Yen Dan kept raising his cup, and the courtiers cheered in response. Everyone drank the wine together, thinking that Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu had won the victory. Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu told them in detail what had happened on Pangu continent over the past few years. Yen Dan and others were beaming with joy, while Yue, Tian Guang, Jing Ku, Qin Weiyang, Fan Yuqi, and other military officers were rubbing their palms, wishing they could go to Pangu continent with millions of pishio in their hands and stir up a storm. The vast Pangu continent, with its endless people and glorious world, was the perfect place for them to show off their might. Compared with Pangu continent, the former homeland of the six dynasties was too small to arouse the interest of these people. It took several hours for Wu Qi to tell them in detail what had happened over the past few years, including the people he had met and the things he had encountered. He described in detail all the details of King Zhangqiu and Patriarch Miao Ying, King Yang Qiu and King Yang Shan, and how Feng Lingling was rescued after being convicted. There were many things that Wu Qi had not seen through, but he was sure that someone among the people present could. After describing everything, Wu Qi told Yen Dan about his worries and worries. Although he had obtained the black celestial forbidden curse from King Yang Qiu, it was a mysterious curse inherited from the ghosts and deities of the outer heavenly realms. Even Wu Qi and Princess Zhang could not fully grasp its mysteries. No one could tell what would happen when the curse was broken. Therefore, although Su Qin, Yen Bugui, and the others were all on Pangu continent, and the 1,000 elites of scouting office were the descendants of important ministers of Great Yen, Wu Qi dared not to try breaking the curse on them. Su Qin, Yen Bugui, and the others were the absolute elites of Great Yen. Even the loss of one of them would make Wu Qi feel uneasy. After listening to Wu Qi, Yen Dan understood his worries and worries. Just as Yen Dan was about to say something, he clapped his hands lightly and gave a few orders in a deep voice. Before long, a few palace maids came out with a baby who was at most a month old. At the sight of the baby, Yen Dan narrowed his eyes and said nothing. The faces of all the civil and military officials in the hall turned unsightly. Chi-Chi turned to look at Yen Dan. Sun Kuang and Mod rose to their feet and wanted to say something to Yen Dan, but Yen Dan waved his hand and did not allow them to speak. Wu Qi, it's him. He is. His facial muscles twitched as Yen Dan gritted his teeth and said, he is the bloodline of the Yen clan. We haven't had the time to name him. If anything happens to him, it will not hurt Great Yen. It's him, right? Not allowing any objection from the courtiers in the hall, Yen Dan snapped. That's it. All of you are the pillars of Great Yen. How can anything happen to you? Even if he is the bloodline of the imperial clan. Let him die. The corners of Sun Kuang and Mod's mouths twitched. As they took a step forward and were about to say something, Wu Qi had already pointed his finger out and cast a beam of black light onto the baby's forehead. Suddenly, a gust of chilly wind rose into the air, and a plume of dark smoke rushed out of the baby's body. Chapter 652. When the dark mist sprayed out, the bodies of all the emperors and ministers of Great Yen in the Great Hall trembled at the same time. Whether it was Yen Dan, Sun Kuang, or the juniors of Great Yen imperial clan who were serving in the Great Hall, or the descendants of various powerful clans, all of them fell limply to the ground, unable to move. In the Great Hall, only Wu Qi and his companions could stand firmly where they were. As for the few palace maids who came out with babies, although they were not affected by the black celestial forbidden curse and were just ordinary girls selected by the common people, the cold air in the dark mist was so strong that it contained an evil force that could corrode one's soul. Unable to withstand the cold, the few palace maids fell to the ground twitching, and before long, they were no longer breathing. As the souls of these palace maids were sucked out by the dark mist, they were actually dead people. However, their bodies were indeed still alive. They were still warm and fragrant, and they were still the same beautiful women. But they were only alive with their fleshly bodies, and their souls were long gone. Ao Buzan had shrunk to 3 inches long, lying on Wu Qi's shoulder like an earthworm. The purple inkstone, which had shrunk to the size of a green bean, was moving in and out of his mouth, while his 2 furtive eyes were staring at the dark mist in front of him. He was murmuring under his breath, and no one knew what he was talking about. The baby, who was only about a month old, floated up from the arms of the palace maid who had fallen to the ground. The swaddling clothes on his body were corroded by the dark mist, turning into pieces of decaying dust in just a blink of an eye. A strange evil gleam shone from the naked baby's eyes. His pupils slowly dilated, and in just the space of a breath, the once black and white eyeballs had turned pitch black. The bizarre eyes stared at Wu Qi from head to toe, and Wu Qi could not help but feel a chill rushing up from under his feet, making him feel cold all over. Fearing that the baby would do something to hurt the people, Wu Qi's index finger sprayed out a large sheet of black light that flowed like water, condensing into thousands of black runes the size of ants and attaching them to the bodies of the people in the Great Hall. These primordial runes could disperse all evil spirits and devils. They were great divine abilities used by ancient cultivators to protect their primordial spirits from being invaded by external devils. The baby chuckled weirdly, then slowly raised his fair and tender hands, clapped his hands, and praised, "It's been a long time since I last saw such authentic primordial spell symbols. What kind of crappy stuff are those human oracles using nowadays? They refuse to learn the good things left behind by their ancestors and insist on learning those inferior things that they have modified." With a soft sigh, the baby shook his head and said, "Each generation is worse than the previous. You, on the other hand, are very interesting. You actually obtained the orthodox immemorial runes inheritance. Grand and simple, a single character could end life, a single character could end death, a single character could break through the void, and a single character could create a world. These primordial runes were the Daos that the ancient people used to fight against the innate gods. I really can't be bothered to talk about those talismans nowadays." The baby's voice was soft and delicate, like the meowing of a newborn kitten. However, the strange scene of a 1-month-old baby speaking like an old man sent chills down the spines of everyone in the hall. Wu Qi's heart was racing as well. He took Princess Zhongli's little hand and shielded her behind him, then took a step forward to approach the baby and cried out in a deep voice, "Are you Lao Ai, the celestial fiend from the outer heavenly realms?" With a wave of his hand, the pot of wine in front of Yen Dan flew into his hand. The little man took a sip of wine from the spout of the pot and smacked his lips in enjoyment. Then he said in a lukewarm tone, "Yes, I am Lao Ai. You want to break the black celestial forbidden curse, don't you?" After a moment of silence, Wu Qi nodded and said, "Yes. Are you the one who taught the black celestial forbidden curse to King Yangshan?" Lao Ai leisurely drank all the fine wine in the wine pot, then casually threw the wine pot on the ground and smashed it into pieces. After stretching himself, he floated in midair and sat cross-legged comfortably on a cloud of black mist. Holding his chin with both hands, he looked at Wu Qi and said with a smile, "I taught him the black celestial forbidden curse. It's a mystic technique that I taught him." Staring at Lao Ai, Wu Qi clenched his teeth and asked, "I used the technique to undo the curse. Why did you do this?" Lao Ai looked at Wu Qi innocently, then curled his little lips and complained, "What did I do?" Glaring at Lao Ai, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Why did you come here? Why did you possess this boy's body? Why did you take the lives of those maids? Why didn't you let me undo the curse?" A 5-colored divine ray burst out from Princess Zhongli's back, which abruptly transformed into 5 swords that wheeled rapidly behind her. As the sword spun, an ear-splitting sword cry rang out in the Great Hall. A bright gleam flickered in Princess Zhongli's eyes as she stared fixedly at Lao Ai, as if she would strike and kill him at the slightest disagreement. Giving Princess Zhonglu a surprised look, Lao Ai exclaimed, "Wonderful! You're actually a demigod who has awakened the bloodline of an ancient god? Aye, and you're even such a beautiful girl? Easy. If those old fools knew they had a treasure like you, wouldn't they break their heads for you?" You're a demigod, and a demigod who has awakened his own bloodline. Aye, you've even formed an innate divine soul. You're a highly sought-after treasure. Their sons and grandsons need such a good vessel to breed their offspring. Wu Qi's face darkened. Clenching his teeth, he cried out, "Lao Ai, answer my question. If you continue to talk nonsense, don't blame me for being rude." Lao Ai gave Wu Qi a sideways glance, spread his arms, and said lightly, "I'm just being kind. Don't let this girl beside you show off her power for no reason. If the few leaders of the ancient gods on Pangu continent know about this little girl, the Eastern Green Emperor, the Northern Black Emperor, and the Western White Emperor will definitely send out countless subordinates to rob her." Wu Qi stared coldly at Lao Ai, his eyes flashing with lightning. The natural energy in the surroundings rushed into his body and was quickly transformed into lightning bolts by the eye of heaven wrath in his eyes. Lao Ai's face darkened slightly. He looked thoughtfully into Wu Qi's eyes, shook his head, and sighed. Don't be angry, let's talk nicely. If you're still angry, I'll turn around and leave right away, then sell the information about this little girl. Don't blame me when you're hunted all over the world. The lightning in his eyes retracted abruptly. Smiling, Wu Qi cupped his fist at Lao Ai and said, "There's no need for this, senior. Let's talk nicely." Lao Ai narrowed his eyes and stared at Wu Qi's smiling face. Suddenly he shuddered. He shook his head and said with a wry smile, "What bad luck. I've bumped into a difficult little boy. TSK, you're much more difficult to deal with than those blockheads like King Yangshan. Alright, let's talk frankly." After a moment of pondering, Lao Ai began to calculate for Wu Qi with his fingers. The Black Celestial Forbidden Spell was a restrictive magic Hamo had taught him after one of King Yangshan's blood sacrifices. It was a small part of a strange cultivation technique Hamo had picked up from the battlefield of many ancient almighty experts after one of the ancient catastrophes. It was called the Black Celestial Forbidden Mantra, which focused on the tempering of the innate divine soul. It was bizarre, unpredictable, and shockingly powerful. But the Black Celestial Forbidden Mantra was completely different from Lao Ai's own cultivation path. Lao Ai had tried to cultivate the Black Celestial Forbidden Mantra and nearly became a lunatic. As a result, the Swan Ni mantra became Hamo's private collection. After King Yangshan sacrificed 3,000 heaven immortals with cultivation bases to Hamo at one time, Hamo's power was greatly increased, and he gave him a huge amount of natural treasures so that he could forge a natal fiend weapon. After he successfully killed an old enemy in the outer heavenly realms, Hamo taught the Swan Ni mantra to King Yangshan as a reward. The Black Celestial Forbidden Mantra was mysterious and complicated, and once it was controlled by Lao Ai, it was extremely difficult to break. When King Yangshan received the legacy of the Black Celestial Forbidden Mantra, he and Lao Ai had agreed that once someone broke the mantra, that person's soul would be offered to Lao Ai as a sacrifice. For so many years, no one had ever used the mystic technique to break the mantra. Therefore, as soon as Wu Qi was chanting an incantation gesture to break the curse on the baby's soul, Lao Ai, who had sensed the aura of the curse, immediately followed it and arrived. "You can't blame me for this. It's a pact between King Yangshan and me." Lao Ai laughed, counting on his fingers. Over the years, at least millions of people have been sealed by him with the Black Celestial Forbidden Mantra. Haha, those people have countless descendants. If their souls are all harvested by me, then my strength will at least double. He took a deep breath, then turned to Wu Qi with a smile and said, "Frankly speaking, King Yangshan will never release those people he has sealed. However, he couldn't guarantee that the method to break the Black Forbidden Soul curse wouldn't be leaked. That's why he made a contract with me. As long as someone breaks the curse on someone, the soul of that person will be my sacrifice." When they heard this, Yen Dan and the others could not help but curse in their hearts at the same time. The grumpy Fan Yuqi even broke out into curses, cursing King Yangshan's 18 generations of ancestors crazily. Lao Ai gave Fan Yuqi a sideways glance and said with a cold grin, "Curse, curse, curse as much as you want. It's very likely that King Yangshan's 18 generations of ancestors were your ancestors thousands of generations ago. Hee, you are all human beings, and all human beings originate from Pangu continent. Diyu in Liangzhu is the place where the ancestors of the human race ruled. Go ahead and curse. Curse your own ancestors. The more pleasant the curse, the better." Fan Yuqi gritted his teeth and kept his mouth shut. Swanee was laughing so hard that she almost fell off the black cloud. Wu Qi exchanged a helpless glance with Yen Dan, then said with a wry smile, "So, what do I have to do to break the curse on them?" As soon as Wu Qi broke the curse on the baby, Lao Ai immediately followed his aura and arrived. Wu Qi was sure that Lao Ai must have done something to the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse, and perhaps the fate of all the imprisoned people had been in his hands all along. In Swan Ni's eyes, all the people who were imprisoned by the Swan Ni's celestial forbidden curse were fat sheep. Therefore, when someone started to break the curse, he immediately rushed over to harvest their souls. What a scoundrel! Wu Qi cursed in his heart. Lao Ai looked left and right, pondered for a long time, and then suddenly looked at Wu Qi with a little embarrassment. That's easy. You just need to offer 10 people as a blood sacrifice for one soul. Lao Ai smiled and made a hand gesture. I don't care about the grudge between you and King Yangshan. 10 people for one soul, that's a fair price. Wu Qi clenched his teeth, while the faces of Yen Dan and the others flickered. There were countless members of the imperial clan and powerful clans in Great Yen, and the total population was more than 1 million. How many people would be killed for such a blood sacrifice? But Wu Qi gritted his teeth, stamped his foot, and agreed to it on the spot. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.